Good evening. You are watching the Back Talk Bros. I am the K in back, the keys, and hopefully Brian and Aaron get with us, and we have the full crew tonight as we review the Chiefs game against the Raiders. We preview the Chiefs game against the Bengals. We hit the chat and we talk coaching staff and a whole lot more on this episode of the Back Talk Bros.
Y'all ready for them Chiefs? Y'all ready for them Chiefs?
And we are back. So while we wait to see if Aaron and Gooch can make it tonight, we're going to start out with something that I call by the numbers. We're going to look at some different numbers related to the Chiefs and offense, defense, Patrick Mahomes, certain players, the season overall. And so we're going to look at some of those things and we'll talk about those. And then we'll get on to our review and preview as we have the time, make the time rather. So it's half tempting to just do a huge rant show, but I want to throw some stuff up here and we'll try to keep things as positive as possible as well. And so along those lines here, for all the Chiefs struggles this season, Kansas City, weeks 1 through 16 here, you can see Kansas City is still in 4th place in regards to offensive 3-and-out rate. So they are still among the top of all the efficient offenses in the NFL, behind the Lions, the Dolphins, and surprisingly, the Green Bay Packers here. And so, listen, it is what it is. With everything going on, with all the offensive issues, there are still some good signs. Maybe these signs are merely indicative of how good Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce are, but nonetheless, there are some positive signs here for us. This is one of them. And so I wanted to throw that one out here for everyone. And speaking along those lines, I'm going to throw another one up here as well. This one from a tweet, but hopefully you can see it really well here. Timo says it's crazy that the Chiefs are still ranking 7th in terms of moving the sticks, 5th on early downs. And so, see if I can size this one up a little better for you. That's the exact opposite of what I want to do. Sorry about that. Make this, I don't know. Hopefully you can read that here. So the 49ers are number 1 in their ability to convert a new series of downs, followed by the Cowboys, the Bills, the Lions, the Dolphins, the Eagles, and then Kansas City, who, by the way, is ahead of the Baltimore Ravens. So this is an offense that is still getting things done, even in the face of how ugly everything looks. So, hey, listen, there's at least that. Now we'll get to something a little bit uglier here. This is the 2023 quarterbacks in the pocket. And so this is through all 16 weeks of the season. Horizontally here, we see the percentage of dropbacks from within the pocket. Okay, so the higher the percentage, the higher the percentage here, all the way on the right side up to 70% percentage of dropbacks from within the pocket. Okay, on the left side, we're getting to a lower percentage here, and as you can see, Tommy DeVito, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields make up this lower percentage. Daniel Jones down here. Well, unfortunately, Patrick Mahomes is right here as well. Looks like he's fifth or so, right along the line here with Lamar Jackson, but fifth lowest percentage of dropbacks from within the pocket. Guys, this is not pretty. Okay, vertically here. EPA from within the pocket. So, what's the EPA look like when the quarterback is in the pocket? Here's Russell Wilson at 0.2. Patrick Mahomes is right here, like right around 0.1. If you look how many quarterbacks here are below Patrick Mahomes in EPA from the pocket, like this is your group here. Even Aiden O'Connell has a higher EPA from the pocket than Patrick Mahomes does. The quarterbacks in this bottom part here, and most of these guys, except for Daniel Jones, so all these guys except for Daniel Jones have a higher percentage of dropbacks from within the pocket. But Bryce Young, Joshua Dobbs, Sam Howell, Bailey Zappi, Kyler Murray, Joe Flacco, Mac Jones, Tyson Bagent, and Daniel Jones. Those are the guys who have a worse EPA per EPA from the pocket. That's it. That handful of quarterbacks. That's it. This is not a pretty stat. It is what it is, though. You know, again, like there's a lot to take into context with all of these, and someone calling himself the Great One has popped in. But hey, listen, I'm presenting both sides. You guys can formulate your own opinions. But to me, the fact that our offense, even with Mahomes' struggles, even with everybody else's struggles, that at the end of the day, some of these numbers are still like top 5, top 3, top 7 is hugely impressive to me. Gooch, how you doing, my friend?
I'm all right, brother. How are you?
Hey, I'm hanging in there, man. Hey, I'm not gonna lie, man. I sat Monday afternoon, whatever day it was, because I don't drink, but it's a good game to get you starting, though. Listen, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't even want to think Chiefs. I didn't even want to do this show Monday afternoon, and I didn't even finish the game. I shut the game off because there comes a point where, listen, it's Christmas Day, and I know I'm not getting any happier watching the game. Like there comes a point to where even if the Chiefs had came back and won, it wasn't worth the risk of like everything in between what I'd already seen and the Chiefs possibly coming back and winning. Like all of that still would not have left me in a good place for the family. So I'm just like, I'm done.
After the 2 touchdowns in 7 seconds, I laughed real hard. I think I watched the drive right after that and shut the game off myself. I was just like, ain't no point. They didn't want to win. I don't know what it was. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I don't know if we were blinded by the 6-2 start. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I was looking at it. I just started laughing. I was like, I'm not watching this, and I turned it off.
Well, I think that's kind of the sad reality, right? Like this season has been so many firsts for Andy Reid and or Patrick Mahomes, like to where, I think somebody said in a tweet something about you can tell from Mahomes and Travis's body language in these games, like they're getting so frustrated because they know this isn't a team that has the ability to do what they did against the Texans. This isn't the team who they don't have the ability to do what they've done in the past.
Well, I mean, if you want me to be honest, I mean,
Lie to me, Gooch. Don't be
it
honest.
looks like they look like the Chargers, like they just gave up. I mean, the 27-yard catch that Travis had, that's the fastest he's looked all year on that one play. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't like he said on New Heights today or whenever they aired it, I think it was today,
Yeah.
that the offense isn't accountable. So that now isn't just if Travis is saying that, he's saying it about himself too. That's a
Indictment?
yeah. That's a foundational problem. You know what I'm saying? Like that's an issue, and it wasn't just as much as we want to blame the receivers. There were several plays, and as much as we want to blame MVS, there were a lot of plays that he was open, and Mahomes stared him down and wouldn't throw him the ball. Ross was open on that pick six. He just had already his footwork was trash the whole game. I don't know if it's because Trey Smith was getting beaten like a rented mule all game long. He was running from stuff that we've talked about before. He was bouncing from clean pockets before. I mean, like, he was running from clean pockets. I don't know if who he doesn't trust. He's not going to throw the ball the guys, even MVS, even when they're not open, or even in cases where they are open, they're running towards coverage. They're not like stopping. This team is so just, I don't know. And I don't know if Mahomes is pressing, if he doesn't trust, if it's so much so that he doesn't trust anything about the offense, that he's like, okay, that's where I'm going with the ball. Because it really looked like the Raiders were watching him and he wasn't even looking them off. He was just like not setting his feet. He was just like, that's where I'm going. And the Raiders were keying. They were teeing off on this offense. And the Raiders aren't that good. O'Connell had 48 net passing yards in the first quarter. For the next 45 minutes, he didn't complete a pass. And the defense only gave up 6 points. I don't know how we didn't win. No. I know how we didn't win. I'm just amazed that, I mean, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
Yeah, it
And that's
seems
coming
like
from somebody who sat through Tyler Palco and all that crap for years. This was embarrassing. At least in those games, like I knew they sucked. So I was just like, all right, this it's football. We're gonna lose. It's gonna be a terrible game, but at least I know what I'm looking at. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not even one of those that like, oh, we have to be great every game because you're not gonna be great every game. It's the NFL. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's back.
I think I lost you, Gooch. I got nothing from you, Gooch. I don't know if you're still talking or not. I don't know if it's on my end either. You there? Oh. I guess not here, but I'm sure Gooch will join back here as soon as he can. But since he threw this up, or since he was talking about, speaking of throwing up, like we all wanted to do Monday, he talked about this team looking like the Chargers team that wanted to get Staley fired, and he talked about this offense just looking bad in general, and mentioned Tyler Palko, and I think he was setting the stage for me to throw up this tweet by Adam Teicher, and I get it. Adam Teicher never has anything positive to say. At the same time, though, like this, it speaks for itself. Okay. The Chiefs had negative 18 offensive yards in the first quarter. That's the worst for any NFL team since the 2011 Kansas City Chiefs, who were quarterbacked by Tyler Palko, head coached by Todd Haley, and Todd Haley was fired the next day. That team was 5-8. Todd Haley was fired the next day. Now, I wish that Gooch was back in here, and I wish Aaron was here, because here's the question, and I'll throw this out for everybody, including those in the chat. Is 5-8 with Tyler Palko as your quarterback, is that really a worse coaching job than being 9-6, whatever the Chiefs are? 9-6. Is being 5-8 with Tyler Palko as your quarterback, like how do we measure that coaching job against being 9-6, having the greatest player in the NFL as your quarterback on your team, the greatest tight end of all time being on your team? Like, how do we measure these two head coaching performances? Because 5-8 for Todd Haley with Tyler Palko as his quarterback, regardless of whether Jamal Charles was his running back or not, like, it's not the same thing as having the greatest quarterback in the NFL and the greatest tight end of all time and somehow being 9-6. Or maybe that's being too unfair, because 2023 defenses are a completely different animal. Like this year specifically, offense is down. Like defensive coordinators have been in the classroom all offseason. Defensive coordinators have been doing their work all offseason. And offenses haven't made the adjustments yet. Offense right now is well behind where 2023 defenses are. So maybe none of this is really fair for anyone. Maybe it's not fair for us to be scrutinizing Patrick Mahomes because defenses are disguising, defenses are rotating coverage, defenses are doing crazy things in 2023 that we haven't necessarily seen them do in previous years. Hopefully, Gooch can get back here with us. But while we're waiting, I want to get some more of these up here. Let's see. Make sure I get the right one on the screen. Speaking of Travis Kelce here, and there's Gucci's back. Speaking of Travis Kelce here, at age 34, he will become only the second tight end in history to have 1,000-yard season. Okay. I like this tweet because it's multiple tweets here. Someone else then tweets out week 1 hyperextended knee, which usually takes 3 games to come back from. Travis missed 1 or 3 weeks rather. Week 5, he had a low ankle sprain, which usually takes 1 to 2 weeks. He didn't miss a game. He's had the highest catch rate of his career, the second lowest drop rate since 2018. And he's the number 1 option in this offense without a legitimate wide receiver. Of course, Rashee Rice is coming on, each week, but still a rookie. And it still took most of the season before he was even getting 50, 60% snap rate. And it doesn't matter because Travis has been the number 1 option at age 34 while getting consistently doubled and sometimes triple teamed by the defense, and yet he's 32 yards away from 1,000 yards. All right, Gooch is back here. Gooch, you cut out on me at some points. I'm not sure what you were saying, but you want to go ahead and just cut back in wherever.
Yeah, I was apparently the roadways didn't like where I was in Indiana, so I lost it. I was like, hey, where'd I go? I'm in awe, and I was just gonna piggyback off the Travis Kelce thing. Like that's cool, but if he came back and was trying to play while he wasn't healthy, and that was detrimental to the team, obviously, I mean, it probably wouldn't have made a difference with the way things are going, but I mean, it's 8 straight years of 1,000 yards. That's pretty cool at 34. But you gotta. Here's the thing, and I think this is where it falls on. I'm not gonna say Andy. I'm gonna say this is where it falls on Mahomes, because Kelce doesn't have to be the first target. In the games that they played well, Kelce wasn't the first target. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was when you had to worry about when you're actually throwing the ball to Noah Gray and G. Rice was consistent and stuff like that, and Travis was an afterthought. You're making people pay for doubling and tripling him, but now it seems like Mahomes is. I think that drop by MVS on the touchdown where we should have won. I think Mahomes has lost faith in him, won't throw him the ball, which in turn, if the defense knows you're not going to even take a shot 15, 20, 25 yards downfield, they're not even going to cover him really. You know what I'm saying? They're going to just tie up Travis because they know that's where you're going to go if you don't like what you see. The problem is that now he's not even going through his progressions at all. No pump fakes, no nothing. It's just bail from the pocket and either run or try to find Travis or throw some BS pass because he's used to things like that working. Now, I don't agree with Dante and his taking what the defense gives. I think now he's trying to take too much of what the defense gives, and the teams are keying off like he's not going to go deep. You know what I'm saying? So he's going to go mid. Let's just clog up that middle and see what we can do.
Yeah, I had some stuff lined up about that, but and I was in the chief concerns chat, and I can't remember who it was that they had on, whether it was when they had Al Saunders on.
I hate this
What's that?
phone.
Oh. When they had Al Saunders on, or Larry Kirksey on, but one of the things that got talked about was, as a receiver running a route, you have to make each, like, from the get-go, like from the moment the ball is hiked, you have to run your route. You have to start out with the explosiveness at the beginning of your route as a wide receiver, as if you are running a 9. Like, that's how you get the defense to backpedal, right?
Well, here's the thing. In that game, is it snowing where you guys are?
It did. It did. It did on Christmas.
Here's the thing. Ross had them. He was running like that. He had his man beat on several occasions. MVS was getting free. He's just not chucking the ball. I think Mahomes is either gun shy, or he's trying to be Aaron Rodgers now, and the things that made him great, the chances that he took because he knew he could fit a ball in certain windows, or at least give his guys a chance, he's not doing anymore. He's just not doing it. And I don't here's my overall gonna be hated take. They should just lose the next 2, not hit the playoffs. Then they need to get a complete overhaul. Now, I don't know. You've got the defense in place for at least one more year. Snead or Chris Jones, you're going to have to decide. But if you like Williams or Watson or whatever, then you tag and Trey Snead and get some picks. I mean, and this starts at the top. Clark for being oblivious. Veach for assuming that in today's NFL, average is going to get you another Super Bowl. And everybody's going to say, we only lost Juju, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's great. Juju isn't just average. If you look at his numbers this year, he is. But he was above average last year. You know what I'm saying? Like, on bad knees, he almost hit 1,000 yards. He knew how to work the zones and find soft coverage where he could be an open target for Mahomes when Kelsey was doubled and tripled. They had to respect him they had to respect him. They don't respect Rice at all. Not yet, anyway. Hey, Hannah, I know that wasn't for me, but hey. I think an overhaul is needed. You know what? I would even keep something that Dan Talks Football. Please subscribe to him. He's great. Ross missed 7 games for not even being arrested. So that stunted his growth. I would make Sky a 5. I'd keep Ross, Richie James, Rashee Rice, and I'd go after a true number 1. Now, Higgins is going to break the bank. You're not going to get Higgins. Someone's going to give that cat $28 to $30 million a year. It's going to happen. But Mike Evans or Keenan Allen, short-term contract, sure-handed. I mean, because the Bucks are over the cap already, and they're going to have to pay Baker. So, or Stephon Diggs keeps tweeting out to Mahomes, "Call me when the season's over."
Yeah, I had to
Or
look. Go ahead.
somebody tweeted and said, "Give up your picks for the next 2 years, move up and draft Marvin Harrison Jr." Which, if you think about it, most of our defense is under contract. Our offensive line is at least under contract. You can extend Creed right now. Decide what you're going to do with Tooney. You need a running back though. Like, I like Pacheco, I do, but that guy doesn't make people miss. And Clyde has what, one good run a game? That's not. I mean, maybe I'm too hard.
Well, there's about 50 things there to respond to.
Sorry, go ahead, brother. I'll listen.
But I'll just start with this. Are we expecting that the Chargers are going to cut Keenan Allen? He is currently under contract for 2024, but he does have a $34 million cap hit with only $11.5 million dead cap. So do we think that they're going to cut him, or do you think that there's going to be an extension to soften some of that?
Is it the Spanos family?
Yes.
They do not like spending money.
No, you didn't see the report the other day that came out from who was it? It was one of the big guys like Rappaport or Schefter or one of those guys who was talking about how the family keeps hearing about how cheap they are and how hurt they feel from those accusations and how they've put all this money into the Chargers payroll, and that money is not going to be an object in their new head coach in their search.
That's the new head coach. But the thing is that, and if they did put money in, they're talking about how cheap they are. Here's the thing. You're not going to pay a 32-year-old Keenan Allen. You're not going to give him another 4 or 5 year deal at what is going to be probably top of the market prices. You're not going to do that because I think Herbert's deal kicks in next year. You looking that up? I'm pretty sure it does. And if it does, they're not going to have cap room to try and keep some of those good pieces that they actually do have.
So I'm going to look that up, but just to kind of move on, because that was just a question. But well, first off, I'm with you on Mike Evans, and I was in the chat on Dan's show last night, and he doesn't like the idea of Mike Evans at all, but I do, and I was trying to make the point. You were talking about Mahomes throwing two contested windows, and I know I probably texted you and Aaron a little too much this weekend, but I had the multi-view on YouTube TV, so I was watching 4 games at once, and it just it was hard this weekend to watch Joe Flacco throwing to Amari Cooper, who was catching everything thrown in a radius around him. It was hard to watch Mike Evans catching everything that Baker Mayfield was throwing in a radius around him. And, even Amon-Ra St. Brown, throwing everything that Jared Goff was throwing anywhere close to him. And it's just like Patrick Mahomes can throw in tighter windows than every single one of these quarterbacks, but he doesn't have the receiver who could do what these guys were doing. Amari Cooper was making Joe Flacco look like Joe Flacco in his youth. Mike Evans was making Baker Mayfield look like an MVP candidate.
He really was.
and Amon-Ra St. Brown makes Jared Goff look even better. So it's like, I want Mike Evans on this team next year. And, Dan's like, well, he's not a yak guy. And who the hell cares if he's a yak guy? You have Rice, you have Tony, you have guys who can be yak guys. You need someone who, middle of the field, mid-depth, between 10 to 20, 25 yards, that you can throw the ball to any tight window like Mahomes can do, just as good as any other quarterback, who can make the contested catch. That's what this offense really needs right now.
I think Ross could be that. Not as good as Evans. Obviously, he's still young. But Ross is a big body like Evans, too. And I think he has the hands. He just hasn't been able to be on the field. But yes, to Evans. I mean, it's you don't have to be – this is where I was going with that, which I think Ross and Evans and all them could be. But you know why Jarvis Landry was so good? He wasn't a yak guy either, but he could get 10 yards and move the chains, and he was sure-handed. This is why teams paid him, because he would be a 120-catch guy a year with sure hands. He wasn't going to get 10, 15 touchdowns a season. He'd probably get you 4 to 6, but he wouldn't get you 10 yards. He knew where the first down marker was and how to get past it and play in that area, so he'd get you another first down and move the chains. You know what I'm saying? That's what this team needs. It's too reliant on track. And I love Travis Kelce. He'll go down as probably the greatest tight end to play the game. He probably already is, arguably, depending on if you think Tony, who paved the way for Antonio Gates and all of them, is, or whatever. But at 34 years old, it's time for Travis to stop freestyling. He's not quick enough anymore. I mean, he's still shifty and he can still find soft spots in his zone, but he's a step or two slower. He's not quick enough to freestyle like he used to. You know what I'm saying? It's like that 27-yard run. It's like that country song, I'm as good once as I'll ever be, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, he had that one good run, and then that was that. You know what I'm saying? And then it was like rumbling, bumbling, and he's frustrated and yada, yada, yada. But we don't have anybody sure-handed. Rice got targeted 12 times, only had 6 catches. Travis dropped a touchdown. Gray dropped a touchdown. I don't know what's going on.
So Justin Herbert, next year he has a $19 million cap hit. The following year, 2025, is when it jumps up $37 million, and then it gets much, much higher every year after that. So really not too bad next year for them, but that also means that they can't really convert. They can't really cut his cap number much, because his base salary is $6 million. All the rest of that is his prorated bonus. So there's no getting away from that part of it. And so that is what it is. But I'm with you on Mike Evans. Listen, I understand where Dan's coming from, but you can win in both ways. And here's the bigger thing, right? Here's the bigger thing that I think, and I love Yak, but the bigger thing is where do you get the fumbles from? From the Yak, right? Catch the ball, go down 20 yards downfield like Mike Evans. You're not fumbling the ball. How did we win against the Dolphins? Tyreek trying to get Yak. But, it's like you can have both. You should have receivers who can do both. But I think, and you were going back to what Dante Hall said. And it's like we've seen everything, right? Over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen defenses play us every single way now. And we were adjusting to one way. We weren't becoming a versatile offense who could attack every single way. We don't have the receivers for that. That's on Andy and that's on Veach, that we don't have the receivers to attack in every single way. We went yak heavy. We don't have guys who can separate, who can, we don't have an intermediate game outside of Travis Kelce, who's getting double and triple teamed. We don't have a deep game. And what I was saying when you came back in there, whether it was Larry Kirksey or Al Saunders, I don't remember who Jason Dunn had on a show, but they were just talking about, for any route a receiver runs to be effective, right? It's all predicated off of the 9 route. It's like the jump off the ball has to threaten the 9 route. That's what gets a defensive back in a back pedal. It's like, for baseball fans out there, they call it pitch tunneling. Every single pitch, like whether fastball, curveball, changeup, slider, sinker, whatever you throw, right? Pitch tunneling. Greg Maddux was famous for this. Pedro Martinez, was Greg Maddux, but with velocity later on. But the key between each of them and every great pitcher is pitch tunneling. The ball, the spin, the trajectory all looks the same until the last second. Fastball, curveball, slider, they all look the same to the batter until the last split second. It's the same way with running a route as a receiver. Every route is based off of the 9 route. You threaten deep. If you have no deep threat, if you're not calling plays that even threaten it, if you're Mahomes and you're not throwing any 9s, the defense can just set back. And Shannon Sharp and Chad Johnson were talking about this after the game Monday night. The Raiders DBs were just sitting there. They weren't moving. They didn't have to move. You can sit there, at an intermediate level, because you have no threat that the Chiefs are going deep. And if they go short, you have the guys who can close on them fast enough. Like there's no threat. You have to have the deep threat. You have to be able to back the guys up. Or if you're constantly doing the short, you got to break some tackles. And then as the DBs move in, then you got to start throwing it deep again and making them pay for it. But we're not doing anything. And even if we wanted to, right now, the offensive line is screwed up. Like, this is why I have such a hard time when people want to blame Nagy for everything, because it's way beyond the scope of Matt Nagy. But I think people are way too afraid of saying the problem rests with Andy Reid, partially because they realize that doesn't get you anywhere. Andy isn't leaving. Andy's not leaving. So, it's like, if Andy's the problem, but Andy's not leaving, what's the answer? Because who challenges Andy? Gooch, who challenges Andy? If he doesn't bring in a coach who is willing to challenge him, who challenges him? Like, he has the whole control over it. Does Brett Veach have the authority to challenge Andy on his scheme? On him not holding his coaches accountable? His coaches not holding his players accountable? Like, who challenges Andy? Clark Hunt? Like, that's my big question is you can't just say it's Matt Nagy when Andy Reid is the freaking head coach. He's the offensive guru, and this offense is his baby. Like, his fingerprints is all over it. But who's holding him accountable? And who even has the power to?
I wish I had an answer.
Sorry.
I wish I had an answer.
Kind of a rant, but this whole show could have been a rant, but thankfully I kind of have a migraine, so I didn't want to do an hour and a half but it's just frustrating, right? Because Andy Heck has been an offensive line coach in the NFL now for 18 years. He was an assistant offensive line coach before then. He played in the NFL for a number of years. So That's one of my biggest things. Like, we miss EB because he holds people accountable. Okay. What about the offensive line? Does Andy Heck really need Eric Bieniemy here to hold his players accountable? He's a veteran NFL offensive line coach. 18 years. He's been an NFL offensive line coach. Does he really need Eric Bieniemy here to hold his players accountable? Should he really?
No, I don't even think it's that. I think you brought up a good point. This team was sloppy before. It just seems like it's a lot more so now. And maybe the one thing that we didn't see, like I even put out that maybe they were tired because in 5 seasons they played an additional, basically a whole nother season of games
Right.
over the time. But then as I think back on it, like what we thought about what I said after the first Super Bowl, and I was like, if they just rest on their laurels because they've gotten there and nobody's trying to get better, I think that's what we're seeing. I think what we picked on when you especially was kind of spearheading the McCole Hardman thing when all the other receivers were running with Mahomes in the offseason. McCole was practicing on his own, running in the sand and filming it and this, that, and the other, which is part of the reason why he doesn't have really good rapport with Mahomes still. I think we won that last Super Bowl. I think it's one of the things that you get told if you do any kind of sport and you're good at it, don't drink your own Kool-Aid. You know what I'm saying? You're good now, but there are people who are trying to get better to take you out now. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody's going to come back better. And I think they read the clippings. They won the Super Bowl. Hey, you guys didn't even need Tyreek. 0 sacks, blah, 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 blah. You guys are the greatest thing. You should rattle off another 2 or 3 in the next 5 years. We're doing commercials all over the place and popping up at concerts in Brazil and this, that, and the other. And now it's like, which I think buys into their own delusion, which is why you keep hearing the same, like on repeat. We're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. Yeah, you said that last year and it happened. But the problem is last year, you guys were hungry because you got embarrassed by Tom Brady and the Bucs in the Super Bowl. Yes, we had lost our all-pro left tackle and our all-world right tackle. But you got embarrassed and you didn't like it. And you all said it to a man, like, this was embarrassing. So you guys came back even without Tyreek and put on that was your driving force. Now you've got 2 rings in 3 years, and you're like, shit, we did all this. Now we're just waiting for what we say. You and I both said was like, they're waiting on the postseason. Like the regular season doesn't even matter to them right now. But now when you have problems and you don't take the time, I think you preach this the most, like even last year, you got problems you're not working on. Yeah, we're winning, but what happens when these problems pop up? And they will. Problem is we won the Super Bowl. Nobody saw the problems. Guess what you're seeing now? Every little thing that you and I and Dub have talked about for chicken strips and fries for numerous times. This isn't MVS was dropping balls last year. He had a good game in the AFC Championship game. Sky was dropping passes when he was in the games last year. Like this, you have repeatedly said this is nothing new. Winning covers up a lot, and when you're winning, you're not focusing on those things because you're like, oh, as long as we minimize those, but we're still playing like this, we're gonna win. And I was probably one of those that was like, biggest thing was, oh, the difference is Matt Nagy and Bieniemy and yada yada yada. And maybe not from an offensive play calling standpoint, because you're right, it is Andy's offense. No matter what he allows the coordinators to add or this, that, and the other tonight, it's still his offense. And as far as we know, he's still the play caller. So is it that he doesn't have the bad cop? Andy Heck, yes, is the O-line coach, and the O-line was abysmal this week. So I don't know if it's just Christmas holiday, and they were home and relaxed and thought this was going to be a walkthrough, or what. But somebody has to tell Andy no. You know what this reminds me of? And I want you to bear with me here. How many years has Andy been the coach of the Chiefs?
2013, right? Or 2012? 12 or 13?
So 10 or 11 years. This is around the same time that he started to lose the Eagles. Could it be his message is falling on deaf ears now? Now, I'm not knocking Andy Reid. He's a great coach. He's a sure first ballot Hall of Famer. He's got 2 Super Bowl rings. He did not win them in Indy. He won them here. You know what I'm saying? But messages get stale, and then you have to find new ways to, like Harbaugh. Harbaugh has been in Baltimore so long, but you don't remember a few years ago, it looked like he was on his way out. And he changed the message, and they started turning back around again because he was going to be gone before Lamar became a free agent. Like, they were talking about maybe replacing him. Peterson won his Super Bowl with the Eagles, and then his time ran out. You know, Belichick, it took 6 rings in 20 years, but like, it looks like his time's running out. Like, you know, eventually, chicken strips and fries. Maybe it's time for an advisor role. Maybe it's just not even that. Maybe it's, you know what? Maybe it's just time for a different offensive mind. Not saying fire Andy Reid. I'm not even saying fire Matt Nagy. Maybe he needs more than a year. But maybe bring in somebody that can be an offensive coordinator assistant, second in command or something like that, that has just a little bit different ideas to go into Andy's game plan. Like, if you're going to, and maybe this is just old heads talking, but if you're going to, football is becoming a younger and younger man's game. You know what I'm saying? So maybe it's time to freshen up the ideas. Just a little. You know, it could still be Andy's offense. Just have somebody in there be like, you know, instead of doing this, let's do this off of this. You know what I'm saying? Let's switch it up a little bit. Because in the West Coast offense, the concepts are pretty much the same. It really is. What made Shanahan's offense so good is his was centered more around running, but it's still the same concepts. You just need the talent. Luckily, he's got the Avengers over there, you know what I'm saying, in San Francisco, but
right. Yeah, I mean, even in Miami, right? McDaniel still has plenty of talent for his offense. Like, they're not taking scrubs and making that system work. Like, they have legit studs in their offenses to make
right.
it work.
Which I think though, eventually everything comes back to the mean. So you're going to end up having to try and make it work with maybe one good and the rest average guys. You know what I'm saying? I mean, everybody is like, I think Dante was like, be like Brady and this, that, and the other. But what people don't realize is Brady always had one good, and then the rest average that were just a little bit better. Yeah, make it an Oreo shake. I can't think of the two-way player's name, but he always had like that and then the old tight end. Ben Coates. Yeah, that's his name. Ben Coates and a decent, and then we had Amendola and Wes Welker, and then a bunch of average to above average guys. You had Randy Moss, and then it's eventually comes back to the mean. You just probably need to work your offense a little better, or get out there. Nagy was a quarterback at one point, right?
Yeah, right. I believe so.
Get out there and run the routes with these guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, or find you and God, I hate that I'm agreeing with you. Get you an experienced wide receivers coach who has the cachet and get him out there so he can show these guys. If you really want to stick with these guys because they're cheap, and some of them do have talent. Ross has talent. Sky had talent in college. I mean, I don't know if it was Division II or whatever, but I mean, he should still be able to play the slot. Richie James is, even though diminutive, has speed. Get out there with those guys and show them what kind of routes you want them to run. Have Mahomes out there instead of playing pitch and catch. Be like, look, if it breaks down and they do this, this is where I expect you to be, because this is where I'm going to check it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I always give flack for D-Rob about running backwards, but the one thing he did well was made himself available for Mahomes. He was really good at that. And that's why he would always have that one game a year where it'd be like, damn, D-Rob. But other than that, I mean, it's a word I think we need. I think this is a blessing in disguise, me personally. And what's the real unvarnished analysis of Mahomes' performance in this group? Yeah, I said Oreo. Scott, my unvarnished analysis of Mahomes is he looks like Texas Tech Mahomes. He's not planting his feet. He's telegraphing his throws. He's not stepping into his throws. He's only getting one. He's looking at the one read the whole way, so he's telegraphing the play. He's out there. He's running from clean pockets. He's stepping up into congested pockets. Like it's almost like he's lost his mind back there. I don't know if he's got a Zach Wilson going on where he's seeing ghosts, if he's hearing footsteps. I don't know, but he's got to figure out what's wrong, what's broken him up there. I'm not going to say broken is such a bad term because broken means crappy or whatever like that, like he can't come back. But I don't know what's skewed him a little, because he usually has 3 or 4 games where he kind of falls out like that, but it was never all of this in one game. Like, it's never been like this. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's tired with the 2 babies. I don't know if it's the constant talking about Travis and Taylor. I don't know if it's, if he's shouldering more of the responsibility on him and he feels like he has to do all this, which is weighing on, because stress in any environment in your job will affect the way you do your job. That goes for anything, not just high intensity inches inches are basically life and death, and the wrong hit could put you on the shelf for life. You know what I'm saying? Like, even in your normal job, stress is a killer. And then when you're dealing with billions of dollars in revenue and you're getting paid hundreds of millions of dollars to play a game, yes, anything that mixes chocolate and vanilla. I like a good mix. I think he needs to sit down and do some introspection. And I'm sorry I went on this rant. I know we didn't want to do an hour and a half for the rant. You said that already. And I've been talking your ear off, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I would like a brownie. Anyway, I promise I haven't been thinking just about food. I've been listening to what you said, but I mean, I would have to write everything down here.
Yeah, I don't usually go on tangents like that very often with multiple things. I usually leave that to you, but this
Yeah,
game just threw
there's
me.
so
Like,
there's so much here, and yeah, I mean, all right. First off, I'll go back to what you were talking about with Andy. He was in Philly for 14 seasons. This is season number 11 in Kansas City. Season number 11 in Philly, he was 10-5, I want to say. Season 12, it's different then because, we have that extra game now. He was 10-6, which we're setting at 9-6 right now. Season 13, they finished 8-8, and then season 14, they were like 4-12. So we're closely, year wise, we're kind of getting there. But, I want to say this, Gooch, because I think it's different, right? And I've kind of talked about this on Twitter in regards to comparing the Chiefs dynasty with the Patriots dynasty. Bill Belichick was like 51 when they won that first Super Bowl. And he's like 71 now. Andy Reid is 65, and he was 62, getting ready to turn 62 or 63 when the Chiefs won their first Super Bowl of the Mahomes-Reid era. So there's quite a bit difference there, right? As far as building a dynasty, there's a huge difference between being 51 as an NFL head coach and being 62, 63. Kind of go back to what you were talking about, talking about players being tired. I want to ask, is it possible that Andy and some of the coaches are tired? Because it maybe not, well, definitely physically, because you're always talking about, Andy's work ethic and Andy's work schedule. You start putting in all this effort in games, and you're now doing it as a 65-year-old who's behind a desk, doing these 16, 18 hours and sleeping a few hours. Physically, that's not good for your health. It's not good for your intellect, your ability to, think through things. And the older you get, it's taken a lot more to be able to do what you did when you're younger, as we all know, even though we're not even close to Andy's age. And yes, I'm not taking an opportunity to throw a joke at Gooch here because I'm being serious with this. I'm trying to think of possibilities here. And one of them that seems really plausible to me is that Andy, as a coach, putting in these hours and, like you're saying, being in the AFC Championship 5 or 6 straight years and playing in 3 Super Bowls, that, maybe it's not a drain on the players because they've all been young enough, right? We have one of the youngest teams by snap shares in the NFL. Maybe it's affecting, Pat with having a second kid at home. I think I kind of said something about that before the season began because I have a little bit of experience with it, but, it's
not just a little, you got a lot of experience with it.
But, for the coaches, right? Maybe it's a bigger drain on them. And to go back to what you were saying, maybe if Andy wants to stay the head coach of this team moving forward, and especially if he wants to have the kind of longevity Belichick, has had, because Belichick got started on that dynasty way younger than Andy Reid did. Maybe to get there, he has to just be a head coach. And we don't know. Maybe that's what he was trying to do with Matt Nagy coming back.
Yeah, be Harbaugh, be Sirianni, be
yeah, you have to.
You know what I'm saying? Be the CEO and let those guys call plays. And then while you're running the team, be on the lookout for their successors, because if they're good, they're going to get snatched away to be head coaches. I mean, and you know what? I didn't even think about that until I think you said it in a tweet, because I think we all take for granted that Andy's like, oh, I love this and this, that, and the other. And we forget that Andy's like, Andy's a grandfather. You know what I'm saying? A great grandfather, I think now, or something like that. And I love am I in no way comparing myself to Andy Reid? I am not. But I love what I do. But there are days, weeks, months where I am just completely drained. And even though I love what I'm doing, I hate it. You know what I'm saying? And it takes every bit of energy for me to even muster up the energy to do what I do. You know what I mean? And I would, like you said, I would think for somebody like Andy who is up late and then up early and been doing that for 20 some odd years with his health, it's got to be taxing. You know what I'm saying? You've got to probably have more. I don't want to say bad days because as far as coaching goes, Andy and Belichick are above everybody else. But you've got to have days where you're just not firing. You know what I'm saying? Where it's even going through the motions is going through the motions. You know what I mean? Like you got. I didn't even think about that. You're probably spot on with that. Like the guys are young enough, but Andy's probably like, I don't want to say mailing it in, but he's like just, all right, I've been this, we'll just call this. This usually works. You know what I'm saying? Or I'll just call this. This usually works. And I saw you put up the tweet where Mahomes was yelling, call in the F and play or whatever. If Andy's the play caller, maybe this was one of those days where it wasn't working and he wasn't ready because he was just kind of, I mean, it's, God, he's played he's won 200 and some odd games and lost 100. I mean, he's been, that's 16 games a year. And even in the offseason, you got to think about football. I didn't even think about that. That could be. And I'm with you. Maybe it's time to be CEO. CEO Reid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I assume that's what Pete Carroll does in Seattle. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm pretty sure he's older than Belichick is. Pete Carroll's older than Belichick is. And, there's a difference. Pete Carroll and Andy Reid, I think, are more comparable in that, Belichick's divorced. Belichick, football is his life, right? Belichick and Brady had that in common. I think it's clear that Andy and Pat have in common that they're family guys, which, it kind of puts them at a different trajectory. And I don't know what Peyton Manning's, what his personal life was like, but we know Brady's and what it was like. And we know Aaron Rodgers, those guys are loners. Like football was their life. Aaron Rodgers hates everybody in the world, but I don't know. I'm kind of at the point now, and I forget who tweeted it out, but someone, brought up Andy Reid's offense is struggling this year. Doug Peterson's offense is struggling this year. Maybe teams' defenses have finally figured out this version of the West Coast offense. If you have a head coach who is getting tired, and listen, we've talked for years, right? Andy's not the best at making quick adjustments. You give him an off season, he can make adjustments, right? But he's not great at in-game, in my opinion, in-game and in-season adjustments. Like that was, what we were looking forward to the bye for, because he can do it then. But I think what we've seen this season, and it's not just Andy Reid, and I was saying this earlier, I don't think you were on yet, Gooch, but defenses this year came out way ahead of offenses. Like every offensive statistics across the board are down. All of these great quarterbacks, even the ones who were injured, if you look at their stats before they were getting injured, like the amount of interceptions has been up. The quarterback play has looked much worse overall in general, right? So like there's some of that to speak for. And I'm saying this kind of from the fan side. because I really hope this isn't, what gets talked about in the building. I hope they don't make any excuses. We're trying to be positive here in some way and provide some, some hope, but I really hope they don't do that in the building. I hope they don't make one excuse, because they should play as if there is no excuse and they have to keep improving, right? Which because one of the things is, for as bad as this game looked, you're still talking about 2 plays in 7 seconds that was the difference in the game. That was the difference in the game. You take away those 2 plays and the Chiefs win 14-6. The Raiders did not score an offensive touchdown on our defense. Their 2 touchdowns came from our offense making 2 plays in 14 seconds. For as ugly as the season has been, with the exception of maybe the Denver loss, every single one of these games has still came down to 1 or 2 or 3 plays where we've shot ourselves in the foot. Again, I don't want our team talking about that. I want them working harder and focusing on what they need to do better. But, as fans, you still have to kind of mention it. But one of the things I want to throw out, Gooch, along those lines, right? Because we talk about all the things broken with the offense. And we talk about missing Juju. Yes, there can be some merit to that. The problem is we're not missing 2023 Juju, which sucks. If we were talking about having 2022 Juju back, that would be one thing. But where I was going with this is, okay, so this offense has looked kind of disjointed in a lot of games over the last 2 or 3 years, even with EB there. We talked about it, right? We talked about a lot of things last year where, a lot of fans were just like, well, we won the game. Stop being so negative and nitpicky, and critical about everything. And it's like, we won because of this one play. If it hadn't been for this one play, we would all be complaining about losing this, right? What I want to say is, how many times, if we go back and we look at the last couple of seasons, has Andy's offense not worked? What's worked is Patrick Mahomes' ability to play backyard football and his receivers' ability to, when Andy's plays break down, for them to get open and him to make a play. And that's not happening this year because we don't have the receivers to do it. How much of the difference between this year and last year can we sum up to that? I'm asking you because I'm not saying I'm right, but it's certainly a thought. We had Juju last year who could catch the ball and like Travis, he could find those spots. So you had Travis and Juju. You couldn't double Travis because of Juju.
Right.
Rasheed's not there yet this year. Juju had that ability, like Travis, like Tyreek before him, when the play broke down, to get his butt open. So how much of this could be Andy's offense has been more broken than we've realized in the past? But it's that, that whole backyard element that Pat and Travis and another receiver have been able to add that have kind of saved Andy's butt.
Could be 50-50.
I think there's a lot here. But, again, to me, the most concerning thing is, right, because we can talk about a first-year wide receiver coach, and it's easy to blame him. But when we get to talking to the fact that this offensive line, the interior offensive line, has looked multiple games now as if they've regressed, right? We've even talked before. It's gotten to the point that we've questioned, is Creed injured? Is Creed playing injured? Is Trey playing injured? Is Tooney playing injured? Because they've looked bad during some games, and we haven't seen the offensive tackles get better yet, which is a huge problem. So that, I think that's kind of one of the scariest parts. You have an 18-year offensive line coach, Andy Reid, is an offensive line guru himself. The offensive line doesn't look like it's improving. It doesn't look like Creed or Trey have improved over last year. It doesn't look like Jawan Taylor's improved at all from game 1 to game 16. So when you look at that part of it, I think that's something that's really, really concerning. But on the other hand, it looks like offensive line plays down this year as well. Like, I think defensive coordinators have figured out that you can manipulate offensive lines, and that's one of the keys to what we're seeing, this year and some of the offense being down. But, this is me trying to give both sides of the picture instead of just trying to, push one side or the other. I don't know how much of that is true or not, but, just throwing it out there. But that was kind of a thought I had was, what if Andy, because we've talked about it, right? 2-3 years now, we've talked about Andy's offense. Like, there being games, there being stretches in games, there being stretches in a season where things just did not look right. And I remember us, because we get the same coach speak last year. We know what the issues are. We're working to correct them. They're correctable. And at the end of the season, you're like, where the hell's the correction then? Right? It's like, if things are easily correctable, then why aren't they getting corrected? And here's one of the most frustrating things now. I had this up and I think I lost where I had it. I had it queued up ready to go here. Oh no, I got it here. I want to throw this up, Gooch, because we've been talking about coaching, and I want to throw this up because in everything we talk about, at the end of the day, how do we excuse this? Rashee Rice had 85% snap share last week, I want to say 85, 90%. His first time over like 65 or 70. And then in the Raiders game, he's down to 57 snaps, getting out-snapped by MVS. Like, how do we justify our coaching when MVS is getting 61 snaps, Rashee Rice is only getting 57? Like, give Rashee Rice.
Rookie wall.
But then why are we giving MVS 61? Why not bump up Richie James a little bit? Why not give Noah Gray some more of those snaps? Because, as we've talked about in previous weeks, that 12 personnel looked a lot better, right? When we would do those double motions with Travis and Noah, we were having success. So why not go more to that? You know what I mean? Like,
I think that goes back to what you said a couple years ago, stubbornness, arrogance. I believe you were the first one to call that a couple years ago, wasn't it? When they were like, not seem like they were fixing anything. Our offense just seemed like they were arrogant. They were just keep doing. Maybe this is the year that's actually catching up to them. I want to hit on something real quick.
Right.
Scott, I did say that they looked like they quit on this game. And there is no parallel because this team isn't hungry. I don't think most of them are. I think they celebrated too hard and people didn't get back to work and they assumed it was going to be easy. Kind of like McCole, his first year won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Creed in his second year, won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Smith in his first year won a Super Bowl. Like, Tooney's got 4 rings. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think half of them are just resting on their laurels and they're getting shown up.
Yeah, let me throw out an analogy here, Gooch, because I think this is what you're trying to say, right? It's like, and I'm not using myself in this example or anything, but it's kind of like, we know how women like to change men, right? And they kind of get off on that thrill of successfully changing a man. And so, like, if you're a guy and you get a woman way above your league and, you're out of shape, you're not making a whole lot of money and all these other things, maybe you're still living with your mom, whatever the case is, you're working at McDonald's. I don't know. I'm trying to think of, about as ugly of a picture as I can paint here. Right. But if you're all of those things, right, you're basically, you can't get much worse than what you are. And I'm not saying that that's most Chiefs players outside of like McCole Hardman. Because the analogy breaks down because, if you look at a guy's athletic intangibles, then you're probably talking about a really good looking guy who, kind of just sits at home all day and plays Xbox or whatever in his mom's basement. So pick whatever analogy you want. But kind of the point is, like, if you get with a woman who is like a 9 or a 10 right off the bat, when you haven't shown yourself to be a success in any way, that woman thinks she's going to change you, but you're not going to change because you already got her while being a lazy bum sitting in your mom's basement playing Xbox all day. Like, that's kind of what we're talking about, right? It's like you already got the girl, so
it's a pretty good.
You don't have to work to get her. And maybe that's what EB brought, that hunger, right? Because for EB, he was still hungry because he wanted to be a head coach. The best way to be a head coach is, to be producing these offenses. I don't know. Maybe we're just tanking to make EB look better. I mean, if we're going to throw out stupid theories, I'll throw out that stupid theory. And it's a joke, guys. Oh, any parallel between this post Super Bowl team and the Super Bowl 54 champ Chiefs? I think you kind of answered that one, didn't you, Gooch? I think it's different though, right? Because we went to the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 55, and in one way, you lose an all-pro right tackle right before you get to the Super Bowl, right? Right before the playoffs began, in the playoffs, whatever it was. You lose Mitch Schwartz. You lose.
Yeah, you lost Mitch Schwartz in the divisional round. You lost
Eric Fisher right before the Super Bowl, right? Yeah, championship round.
In the championship game, yep.
We had Stefan Wisniewski in Super Bowl 54. He was a starter for us. We let him go. We didn't bring him back during the Super Bowl 55 year. He signed back with hometown Pittsburgh, who cut him mid-season because of how bad he was playing. We scooped him up for the playoff run, and he ended up one of our starters because of injuries. And we had Austin Ryder, if I recall correctly, as the starting center. We had Wisniewski, who was a backup and had gotten cut during the season by Pittsburgh. We had Mike Rimmers, who was our backup right tackle, starting at left tackle in the Super Bowl. And Andrew Wiley, who was a backup right guard, basically making his debut at right tackle. And then who was it? Allegretti playing right guard?
Yep.
So it's really hard in a way to compare these two because you had a backup offensive line against an out of this world defensive line. So imagine our offensive line last year. Imagine putting those guys up against Philly's offense or defensive line in the Super Bowl, right? It would have looked just as ugly. But where I do think there's a connection is, and I mean, this was my Andy Reid trust issue for a season and a half, was he didn't give the guys any help. We played something like 5-man protection. 95% of the snaps against Tampa Bay in that Super Bowl with a backup offensive line, which was head coaching negligence by Andy Reid. So I think that's where the connection may apply. It was arrogance on Andy's part. The game plan was installed before the stuff with his son. That's not really an excuse. People, it might be legitimate that he didn't make corrections because of that. He didn't make his in-game corrections because of that. But regardless, it should have never been the game plan to bring out an all backup offensive line, period. But especially against that defense, and only go with 5-man protection 95% of the time. So I think that's where the connection is kind of Andy dropping the ball, right? And I think we're too protective of Andy because we like to think he's smarter maybe than he is, or he's too smart for his own good. And, it backfires on him. But whatever the case, we like to make these excuses. Like, I would love to be able to say that Andy is going to unveil everything we've been asking for once we get to the playoffs, and we're going to surprise the hell out of teams. I would love for that to be the case. But every year we talk about, Andy's holding back this, he's going to show us that, and he doesn't do it. At least not to the point that you can justify believing it anymore. But
Dawson's Chiefs, Scott, I think being a completely different era, I really think the reason why that Super Bowl team never made it back.
Oh, Super Bowl 4.
I think that team never made it back just because it was a completely different game. And those guys didn't last long. They all had other jobs. You could play the game completely different. There's a lot more injuries because it isn't a case of wanting to get back, because those guys, like I said, football was basically a part-time job, and you got more money if you went into the playoffs and the Super Bowl and all of that. Obviously these guys get more money too, but their paychecks aren't even what they get for bonuses for the freaking playoffs and Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that team had a chip on the shoulder because they were the AFL team. They weren't supposed to be good. They're just supposed to be doormats for the NFL teams. I know they merged, but, they were still looked at as like the upstart AFL. They were just going to be doormats for their Packers and all that. And so when we won, there was still not, they still wanted to get back, but it's kind of hard when you go from the hunter to the hunted and you're getting everybody's best shot, which this team is now getting. And for some reason, they're not bringing the fire. But I think it's a matter of just want. I think they thought that they could coast into the playoffs and just be the Chiefs of old and everything, and people would fear them or have fear that they could just flip the switch and this team is different. And they're getting everybody's best shot. Nobody's scared of them. You know what I'm saying? How often have you heard, like, back then just about everybody was even and they were great. But have you ever seen anybody talk back to Mahomes when he made an error, like Jack, whatever his name is, did? You know what I'm saying? Or how they're playing the Chiefs now and just basically, just punching their ticket every single game. It was like when we played football, our coaches, when we played defense, our coaches, said, you get back in the backfield, you're kicking in their door, sitting on their couch, waiting on dinner. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's what's happening to the Chiefs. Like, somebody else is kicking in our front door and making themselves comfortable, and we don't have the fire or the want to put up a fight. And we're just going to be like, oh, we'll be good, we'll fix it. I don't think there's any desire. Not now. I think they need to be embarrassed. I think they need to be upset. And then maybe they'll realize where they're failing maybe not failing, but where they're struggling and put some emphasis on it. Maybe they don't have to play a long season this season and people get some rest and get rejuvenated and come back and focused or whatever. Ooh, brownies. Man, I'm a fat kid today.
Every day. Oh. Forgot to take this off. Yeah, sorry about that, Scott. I missed the Super Bowl 4 there. So bear with me. I'm kind of suffering a little bit through a migraine, but I'll make it. Yes, I want some brownies. No, I do. At least just one. I don't want two because then I don't need to be gaining a bunch of weight during break.
Jeff Schwartz put out a tweet not too long ago that said he watched the film and he gave the Raiders defense credit, but he was pointing stuff out saying that a different player was making a mistake on any given play, and you can't scheme around that. He was saying like there would be good protection and nobody would get open, or there would be good protection and they couldn't separate. There'd be, or he'd take a snap and the right tackle get beat and he'd drop his eyes just as somebody was going to get open. Or, he'd take the snap and then Trey Smith was getting beat and so the run game wasn't going anywhere. He was like, can't scheme around that. Like, that's basically all he saw. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, well, I mean, Jeff played, and if he watched it and said there's got to be something to that, but even still, we could be better. Mahomes didn't used to drop his eyes. He used to always be running down or always looking downfield, which again begs the question, what's going on? You know what I'm saying? Which part of that line doesn't he trust that he's now dropping his eyes? Because he hadn't done that since the Super Bowl. Maybe it's the fear of getting hurt if he stays in the pocket because that's happened every year. You know what I mean? I just don't know. It usually happens every year around this time.
Well, and the crazy thing is preseason, we didn't give up sacks. Even early on in the season, like we weren't giving up a whole lot. And I don't know if I think it kind of goes back to what you said about, we're the Super Bowl champs and you have the target on your back. Like teams are specifically studying you for weak links. I think we talked about this last year. Teams are studying you to find every little weak link. And like, even if you have a fresh coaching staff, like you have to have a really big coaching staff in order to be able to put that kind of effort in for every opponent who is putting in that kind of effort for you, which is one reason that I think we do need a bigger coaching staff. One of the things I said on Twitter, I think, or maybe it was in the Chief Concerns chat, was like, or maybe it's the Discord. What I want to see is I want to see, I think we have to go a different direction as far as offensive scheme. Like, I don't want Nagy back. I'm not blaming Nagy for this offense because I think that ultimately rests on Andy. But at the same time, can I give a reason for keeping Nagy? And the answer to that is no. I can't give a reason for keeping him. I think he's a scapegoat. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think this offense is his fault, but I can't give a reason for keeping him. Those are two different things. I think he's got to go. I think you have to replace Connor Embry with a veteran wide receiver coach which Andy should have done to begin with, and made Connor the assistant wide receiver coach for a couple years. Like, the defensive coaching staff is full of veteran guys. At every single position, it's a veteran coach. Maybe the assistant is a younger guy, but he's learning from a freaking veteran coach. There's nothing wrong with having an assistant at every position, because guess what? You know, kind of going back to the getting tired thing, right? I don't know how old Andy Heck is. I think he's in his 50s, but you know, we've talked about, you know, he's been a coach for 18 years, right? He's 56 years old. Spags is like 60, I want to say 60 something. You know, Andy's 65. Like, there's nothing. Spags is 64. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a big coaching staff and you know, having an assistant at every position. Have the veterans there. The assistant brings the energy, right? You can move him along to, you know, the next position, whatever. You know, if he shows a lot of promise or the veteran moves on. But then you get your infusion of youth, right? You bring these guys in from college. You bring them in from outside of your system. They bring the energy. They bring innovation, right? They can work hours and bring energy you can't as an older coaching staff. You know, now I'm interested, you know, how old is Dave Tobe? Because we're talking about guys who are between 56 and 65 now. Dave Tobe's 61. So Andy's 65, Steve Spagnuolo 62, Dave Tobe is 61. You know, those are your three guys, you know, your three out of your four main guys. You know, Matt Nagy, who is younger, he's 45, but guess what? He was a head coach and he likely got burnt out as the head coach of the Bears. Did he take a year off between the Bears and the Chiefs? I don't recall if he did. He probably got burnt out there that last season in Chicago, though. He's probably never recovered. I forget where I was going with that, but you know, I bring in a new offensive coordinator. I think someone from college, myself, Gooch, but someone who has, you know, who's hungry, who is innovative, right? And you can't just be married to a system. You have to understand trends. You have to understand the trends as, you know, defensive trends as well. You have to understand what the defense is trying to do and be innovative enough to work with that. And then I think you just have to have a bigger offensive staff. I think when you have a head coach like Andy Reid, who's 65, when you have a team, you know, who's making deep playoff runs, because your coaches can't do all that work. You have to have guys that you can trust and who have the talent and who are innovative enough and hungry enough and naive enough to push back. You were talking about, was it Jeff? You were talking about Jeff Schwartz? Or was it Mitch?
No, it was Jeff.
All right. Remind me what you said, what Jeff was talking about.
He was just saying that it seemed he watched the film and it seemed like on every play.
Right.
Yeah,
I remember now.
Yeah.
You know, in the RGR Discord, I saw some people.
Oh, before you finish, he also said, like, and Mahomes doesn't trust his guys, and Travis isn't getting as open as he's used to because, well, he's older, and then being double and triple team. But I believe you said something that kind of contradicts that. Well, kind of, but like it's his highest catch rate, his lowest drop rate. But Like he's not further down the field. He's like closer to the line of scrimmage now. Like he's finding things close to the line as opposed to when he would normally be 15, 20 yards down finding. Now he's between 5 and 8. But even still, I don't know.
Yeah. All I was going to say was, in the RGR Discord, I saw people that kept referring to Antonio Pierce as a high school head coach. I don't think that there's anything further from the truth, to that. I think Antonio Pierce has a great mindset to be a head coach. Especially it seems like he's going to be one of those guys like Harbaugh, right? He's not, as far as I know, he's not meddling in the defense. He's letting Patrick Graham do his thing, but he's injecting his attitude into the whole team, right? Which to me, I said weeks ago before, after he's hired, I forget which game it was, but it was before they blew out the Chargers. I said, to me, like, this is the attitude that I want Andy to have, but at the same time, it's a very Raider, how do I say it? A very traditional Raiders attitude, right? Of kill them, put your foot on their necks, crush them, kill them, whatever. Like the epitome of the Raiders as, their whole franchise. Not today, not the last 5, 8, 10 years, where we've dominated them, just like the epitome of the best of Al Davis, John Madden, every coach that they had, during that time of kill 'em, right? Antonio Pierce, to me, is a great fit to be their head coach. And I think Mark Davis would be dumb if he didn't hire him, but I won't be mad if he doesn't, but if he doesn't, I'm going to throw a couple names out for Mark Davis to consider. Brandon Staley and Nathaniel Hackett. Like, if he doesn't want to hire Antonio Pierce, those two guys should be at the top of his list. Yes, that was a joke. But when people were calling Antonio Pierce a high school head coach, I think sometimes as Chiefs fans, we get way too caught up in ridiculous hyperbole. Like, I think Antonio Pierce is a good head coach already, and I had a lot of respect for him before this game. So, like, when you're saying this, like, to me, I'm not surprised. How many games have we seen that so far, right? The Packers game, that's what we saw. The Raiders game, that's what we've seen. We have seen head coaches and their coaching staffs seemingly put in an immense amount of effort to game plan against the Chiefs. By the way, 6-game stretch where we have a rest disadvantage against every opponent we play. Is that a coincidence? We have maybe not maybe the hardest, right? It was by all metrics that I've seen. We played the hardest schedule to begin the year as far as strength of schedule. And then we end the year, the last 6 games, with a rest disadvantage in every single game, meaning every opponent that we play is getting more rest than we are, including 1 or 2 that I believe had a bye before playing the Chiefs, if I'm not wrong on that, if I recall correctly. So I think there's a mix there, right? And again, going back to maybe our coaching staff is tired. Well, these coaching staffs aren't, because they're getting more rest. I think the biggest thing is is the teams that are beating us are playing near perfectly. And again, at the end of the day, it's still coming down to us shooting ourselves in the foot in 1 or 2 or 3 plays. So, I mean, take it however you want to, but anyway, I don't know. I don't want to beat a dead horse unless it's the Broncos. So, maybe at this point it's just time to move on. How about this, Gooch? Any bright spots in this game? Any players? Well, I mean, obviously the defense, right? Obviously the defense. Again, 6 points, 3 field goals, or 2 field goals, sorry. Tommy Townsend, the quarterback, or Tommy Townsend's arm, right? On that fake punt. And I saw a meme someone made about Chiefs receivers when Pat is throwing them the ball versus Chiefs receivers when Tommy's throwing them the ball, about how they're like, I don't want to catch it. But then when Tommy's throwing them the ball, then they want to be all world and go up and be the best receivers in the world. But is what it is. But, outside of those obvious things, were there any other bright spots in this game that you want to talk about, Gooch? Hey, Daryl, good to see you.
I mean, the only bright spot that's been for the last 15 weeks, the defense. And then that throw by Tommy, which was 20 yards to the sideline on a freaking rope. That was it. That was when I was like, oh, here we go, another punt. And then Tommy threw it. I was like, oh, snap. And who would have known that would have been the best pass in the game?
Yeah. It completely caught me off guard. And if I recall correctly, once again, that was Justin Watson who made that catch. Is that right? That was Justin Watson, right?
Yeah, sliding out of bounds. Go figure. He made that catch. I actually, when I saw the play and I saw him doing the replay, I was like, of course they'd have one good play and it'll go against them. That's what I was thinking like that whole time. Like,
is it fair to call Justin Watson Vanilla Harris?
Vanilla Harris.
Because at this point, Justin Watson can make the difficult catches fairly consistently, but it seems like he's just not it's like every other time though, it's a 50-50 whether he's going to come down with the ball. Like, is it just me, or is that not what it seems like? Like, he can make the most amazing catches, and he has this season, and I'll give him credit for it, but then he'll turn around and the next pass, it's like, nope. I already used my good catch.
I mean, at least his hands aren't just for decoration 90%, 10% of the time. Oh, water leak. That sucks.
Well, we're on to the Bengals. Gooch, are we going to beat the Bengals?
Bolton and Tranquil looked good, Scott. They really did. When they were in there together.
Which was not often.
Man, you know what? Usually I would be like, yeah, if we blah, 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 blah. But the defense has been playing so great. Is this the letdown game?
I gotta look this up.
Browning is what, 4-1?
Something like that. He did not look good this last game, but this has been the first time where.
But it's also the first time that he hasn't had his own version of the Avengers, like Chase was out and Higgins, I think. Or was it the other one? I know Chase was out for sure. I think we win. I don't think they fixed the mistakes as much as they want to believe, but I think we'll do enough to win. If the defense continues on the path that they're on. Hopefully them getting them, not the defense, but hopefully the team as a whole getting embarrassed by the Raiders and putting that embarrassing showing on the field, which I'm sure they've all heard from Clark, because Clark is like spearheading all of this overseas football, and the Chiefs are a big proponent of that. Like, the Chiefs are big everywhere, and he doesn't want to put embarrassing product on the field because that affects the brand. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think we can win. I think it'll be tight. I'm going to say 17-14.
Yeah, I've heard some people thinking this game is going to be a blowout, which, if Spags can make Browning look like Aiden O'Connell looked, I could understand that. I think the problem is that Lou Anarumo is a fantastic defensive coordinator, and that defense is starting to come around enough that if this offense looks anywhere close, right? Because you have to know that Lou Anarumo has been watching what every team that's beat Kansas City, what they've done defensively. And Lou was already a thorn in Andy and Patrick's side the last few years. So if anyone could make our offense look uglier, it would be Lou Anarumo. And I think that's the biggest question in this game. You give me a second here. I'm trying to look up Drew Tranquill snaps in this game, because I believe they've been decreasing his snaps since Bolton has came back, despite how great he's looked. And I'm trying to confirm it here. If I can get this to load. Let's see. He had 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17 snaps. Drew Tranquill had 17 snaps in this game. I think that's a problem.
That's crazy.
17 snaps. Leo Chanel had basically double that. Yeah, like 33. So basically double that. Yeah. It was not pretty. All right. I had to look that up. Was just curious here. kind of interested now in the offensive numbers here. So, wow. Yeah, we did not have a positive EPA in any offensive formation. It was not pretty at all. And yet we only came out in 11, 12, and 13 personnel. That's not that unusual, but we ran out of 11, 80, or sorry, we passed out of 11 personnel 82% of the time. We passed out of 12, 67%. And oddly enough, we passed out of 13 personnel 100%, even though it was only 2 snaps. That's why. But yeah, the EPA per play was not good. It was negative in all 3 formations. But, you know, some of that was when we were out in 12 personnel. Travis was only in 12 personnel in 15 of those 21 plays. Listen, I don't want you in 12 personnel if Travis isn't one of your tight ends. Noah Gray was there as the tight end in every single 12 personnel snap, but Blake Bell was in for 6 of those. And I don't want that. It should be Travis and Noah every single time. I didn't even want Blake Bell to make this year's team. Yeah, I don't like that at all. Under no circumstance do I want Blake Bell in my 12 personnel.
I don't even know why he was still on the team. And you didn't even use him to block. Like, you could have used him as a blocker on Crosby with as bad as the line was looking. You didn't even use him for that.
Daryl says we can still win the West with winning one of the next 2 games and lock up the 3rd seed. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's what it takes, because if we lose both and either the Broncos or the Raiders win both, one of those teams is going to win the AFC West. It is still mathematically possible for the Chiefs to lose the AFC West. You know, listen, I understand people, you know, what I don't understand is everyone freaking out about the Chiefs having to play an away game, because this season our offense has looked better on the road. And actually, that's not even a this season thing, is it, Gooch? I think we were talking about this last season. We were playing better on the road last season, if I recall.
Yeah, we were road warriors last year. Yep.
So, you know, it's not what people make it out to be. But, you know, the other thing is, you know, so what? If you're one of the top 4 seeds, right? Well, you're the number 1 seed. You're not playing the first week anyway. But if you're a division winner, you're playing at home the first week. So why the hell does it matter? And we saw a couple of years ago, you can end up playing home the second week. You can end up playing the AFC Championship game at home, not being the 1 seed. You can't just assume that the 1 seed or the 2 seed ahead of you are going to win each game, and you're going to be playing on the road in the AFC Championship. We've already seen that before. So I don't know why people are getting so far ahead of themselves there. To me, the bigger issue is, can the offense get enough fixed, right? Like, can they get enough fixed? This defense can win you a playoff game, maybe 2 playoff games. If you get Pacheco back healthy and you have a healthy McKinnon, right? And I think it was Mitch Schwartz who was talking about, you know, kind of attacking one of, well, he wasn't responding to my tweet, but kind of one of my, you know, talking points of, the wide receiver room, the wide receiver room difference is you lost Juju and you gained Rice and Richie James, right? And theoretically, everybody else should have taken a step forward, but it seems like everybody else, stayed stagnant. Maybe that's because they had a rookie wide receiver coach developing them this offseason. Whatever the case, though, Mitch's point, part of his tweet was, the Chiefs lost those snaps. MVS was getting more snap. MVS and McKinnon and Juju were a bigger part of the offense last year. The offense wasn't great last year, but those three guys had a greater snap share. Those snaps are lost to this season. MVS last season has regressed this season. So the snaps we're getting from him are not near as good, but we not only lost Juju snaps, we lost a bit of McKinnon snaps as well. And I think in reality, I think it's pretty plain that this offense needs both Pacheco and McKinnon, right? When they've both been healthy and they've both been out there, it looks better. Not saying it looks great. It doesn't look like the dominant offenses we're used to, but you definitely still need it. As you said, Pacheco can't make a guy miss, right? You can't utilize him that way in the passing game. You just can't. Run the ball with him, yes. McKinnon's is your running back that you can throw the ball to, right? And I was gonna talk about this earlier because when we were talking about Mike Evans and we were talking about how Dan Andrews, for those of you guys in the chat, you can find I got his channel listed there in our description here, which, by the way, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe and share this channel with others. We don't say that because it's not what we're here for, but we do appreciate it. But if you want that yak guy, right, and as you were saying, Pacheco's not that guy who can make someone miss. Gooch, do you know a running back who's been used a lot out of the slot in the last few years, plays for another team in the AFC West, is going to be a free agent, who's pretty good at running the ball, pretty good at catching the ball, pretty good at getting yak yardage? You know a guy that sounds like? Maybe we could get in free agency. How much would it change our offense if we went out and got Mike Evans and we went out and got Austin Eckler in free agency? How much would those two guys alone change this offense? And I know they're pushing it, respective for running back age for Eckler, who is, let me look here, 28. So I know he's pushing it, for running back age. He'll be 29 next year when the season starts. So it'd obviously have to take the right deal. It'd have to take the right deal with Evans. But I'd do it. What do you think, Gooch?
I'm with you, brother.
So I threw this out to Dan last night, Gooch. I forget who. FLDB, Frankie, who lives in Minnesota, so he hears all the chatter, keeps talking about how Justin Jefferson wants out of Minnesota. So I threw this idea out here, Gooch. Chris Jones and the Chiefs' first-round pick to Minnesota for Justin Jefferson. Would you make that? Would you make that trade?
All day and twice on Sunday.
And part of that is predicated, as I presented it to Dan, would you trade Chris Jones and the first-round pick to the Vikings for Justin Jefferson and then go after Christian Wilkins hard, the DT from Miami, to replace Chris Jones? Like, that's kind of the bundled option.
I would.
But I'm with you that I still think we have to add to the running back room. And guys, we're not being disrespectful to Pacheco, but he can't make guys miss in the passing game. Like, you have to have someone like McKinnon. The problem is, right, and I said this in the RGR Discord, the problem is we are limiting McKinnon this year because he's 31, 32, and we want to keep him for the playoffs. But if you are limiting him that much during the season, what is the point of having a guy like that on your 53-man roster, right? At that point, Jerick McKinnon should be a practice squad guy that you bring up for 3 games, elevate him for those 3 games, let it reset in the playoffs, then you can bring him up in the playoffs. But if you're not playing him because you're trying to save him for the postseason, then what's the point, right? Like, and if your only running back who is good in pass pro is a guy that you're worried about getting injured on any play of any game, you got some serious issues. So, we love Jerick McKinnon. It's no disrespect to him. It's more of thinking logically that you have to have someone that you can count on, not someone you have to baby, and limit their snap count. Or, if we're talking NBA terms, load management. And listen, it's kind of being limited anyway with Pacheco out there. But if you have a guy that you're too afraid to play during the regular season because you want him for the postseason, like, there's big issues with that. Anyway, Dan didn't like that trade, Gooch, just like he didn't like my Mike Evans signing because Justin Jefferson is going to want to get paid $35 million a year. But you know what? Chris Jones wants to get paid $35 million a year too. So, how old's Justin Jefferson? 25, 26?
I don't even think he's that old.
I'm going to look it up here. Yeah, he's 24. He'll be 25. He'll be 25 before training camp starts next year. Chris Jones is like 31, right? I don't think I just made him older than he is. Is he 29? I don't know. Having a hard time spelling his name now. Yeah, he's 29. He'll be 30. So, but then my other question was this, because Dan didn't like that. I said, okay, so who would you go after, Gooch? If not Justin Jefferson, who would you go after having tagged Chris Jones, trading him in your number 1 pick? Who would you go after? Because I don't think that with Chris Jones in our number 1, we can get high enough to draft Marvin Harrison.
I don't know. There's a lot of quarterbacks that are coming out this draft.
Yeah, but the Cardinals have a lot of ammo at the top of the draft. They don't need a quarterback. Right? They're going to have like the second, and right now I think the 2nd and 5th overall picks. Is that right?
Well, the Bears, unless they give up on, what's that kid's name? Fields, aren't going to draft a quarterback. The Cardinals aren't going to, they might draft one to place behind Murray. So when his contract expires in 3 years, they could for 2 years. They can roll with the rook. Patriots are going to need a quarterback. I mean, he's not going to fall far enough that we'd be able to get him, but it'd have to be if you're going to go young, it would have to be Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, and I think from where the Vikings are setting right now, they are projected to have the number, where's that, 14th overall pick. I think if you trade Chris Jones in your first to the Vikings, I think they turn around and they trade for their first rounder and your first rounder to try to get, and maybe more, to try to get up to replace Justin Jefferson, maybe with Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know. Right now the way it's set up, the draft order is Bears, Cardinals, Commanders, Patriots, Giants, Chargers, Titans, Bears again, Jets, and Falcons. That's your top 10.
Titans aren't going to want a quarterback. Commanders are going to want a quarterback. A lot of those teams that you named are going to be quarterback driven.
I think the Giants at 5 would take Marvin Harrison in a heartbeat. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
But here's the other thing, right? Because you kind of talked about the defense, right? And I think you were talking about did you say to tag Snead? You're talking about bringing back Snead, if I remember correctly. It's been a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate this, but Mitch Schwartz, one of the things that he tweeted was, not that it's an either or thing, and I don't know if I have the tweet here, or not, but Mitch Schwartz was talking about, he doesn't necessarily think that you can bring back either Snead or Jones, or that you should. One of the things he said, now stay with me here, and we can talk, we can talk about this, and those in the chat, we can all talk about this and debate it. But one of the things that Mitch Schwartz said that kind of made me pause and start to think, because I want Snead back, right? He's locked down every number one wide receiver out there. He's young enough. He's athletic enough. And I get that we have some depth out there. I still think that Najee Johnson, they were kind of wanting to see if he could be a Snead replacement, and then he got injured. But one of the things Mitch Schwartz said was this, right? And it makes some sense. Schwartz said, you saw this team and you saw it win Super Bowls with the middling defense and a great offense. We've now seen this team with a great defense and a middling offense. Which one of those two, and I'm summarizing this, or I'm actually making it longer, more pronounced than he did, but expanding it. But he said, so basically, which one of these two has worked, right? Investing in the offense and having the great offense, or having the great defense. And again, he's not saying you can't have both, right? I think what he's saying here is you have to invest in this offense first and foremost. If there's money left over for Snead, great. If there's money left over for Jones, great. But we've seen this team with a great offense and a middling defense, and it can beat anybody and everybody on any field in any condition. We've now seen this team with a great defense and a middling offense, and it's not even close. So I think his point is, overall, right? Sure, if you can have a great offense and great defense, not saying don't go for it. I think what he's saying though is that come this off season, the resources need to be poured into the offense. The offense has to be the first to get those financial resources and those draft pick resources. If there's stuff left over for the defense, great. Right? Great. But if the resources have to go to one or the other, it needs to go to the offense. Because this team can't win with a great defense and a middling offense. It has to have the great offense. And it can win with the great offense. We've seen it win with the great offense and a middling defense. To kind of basically put out there what Mitch said. Which kind of made me pause because all I've been thinking about is how much I want L'Jarius Sneed back. So what are your thoughts on this, Gooch? What are your thoughts on this, chat? Is Mitch right? Is there a path for both?
Hey, look, the all-pro, the all-world right tackle, your favorite right tackle's favorite right tackle. If he says it, I'm gonna ride with him. It's truth.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that we've always said with this offense, if we had a top 15 defense, we would win Super Bowls. The offense changed, and our defense is top 3. Unfortunately, the messed up thing about it is we're kind of proving this point and proving our own. Like with our offense, all we wanted was a top 15 defense, middle of the road, that we wouldn't have to get into so many shootouts. But we neglected the offense for the defense this last, couple drafts. Now our defense is great, and our offense has struggled.
Right.
And yes, Scott, you're absolutely right. We haven't drafted. No, yeah, we did. Before Pat Mahomes, we drafted Eric Fisher, number 1, I think. And he started out at right tackle before he moved to left. Because we had, I think Albert was the left tackle then. So we have spent high draft capital on it. It's just that we don't think about it because Fisher was here so long.
Yeah, I think what he's saying though is since Mahomes has been here, right?
Oh, okay.
Even a little bit before. It says before QB1. Talking about Mahomes. So I think that's what he's saying. It is, basically since Mahomes has been here, we have neglected to invest actual draft capital in the tackle position, which Wanye was what, 5th rounder?
Well, keep in mind that for the first 2 years, we had Fisher. And then for these last 2, we've had, or the previous 2 that we had Orlando Brown. And technically, we invested draft capital because we sent our first round pick to the Ravens for him. So technically, we have invested in that position, even though it's for concrete shoes. But yeah, I'm not going to trash the Taylor thing yet, because I heard something today that made me rethink it. I'm usually all with you on that. But he had been playing right tackle the same way for years. And it wasn't until Chris Collinsworth became head of referee the first game of the season that now all of a sudden he had to change the way he plays it. And tackle is at timing, like more timing than anything else position. And so if he's having to reteach himself all the stuff that he had taught himself already, I'm not ready to write him off yet. I think with the changes being from where he was normally setting up to having to be up closer, throws his timing off, throws his steps off a little bit. That's something that when you've locked it in for, let's assume he's been playing since he was 10, you know what I'm saying, for 10 to 15 years playing the position the exact same way. And now all of a sudden, after you've got it mastered, you have to change everything you do about it. It might be rough in the beginning. So I think we should give him one more year before we're like, oh, this was a waste. Just to let him get himself settled in. And I know somebody would say, well, he's a pro and this, that, and the other. Dog, with position as intricate as tackle that a lot of us don't pay attention to because quarterback, receiver, running back is flashy and it gets all the attention. In a game where most quarterbacks have a maximum of 2.5 seconds to throw the ball, a half a second change in how you are performing your duties is a lot. And I think a lot of his holding calls are that. Like he still hasn't gotten comfortable. 2013 Fish, yes, last early OT pick, but he was here in 18, 19, and 20. 18, 19, and 20, because Mahomes was drafted in 18, right?
17.
Okay.
No,
So 17, yeah. 17. So he was here till 18. And then we traded a 31 or number 31 or 32 for Orlando Brown.
Well, Fish was here. When was Super Bowl 54?
That was 18.
55.
That was 19. Wasn't it?
That was 21. That was February of 2021.
So Fish was here for that.
Fisher and Swartz were both here through the 2020, through 2021. Like the 2021 season is the first one we didn't have either, right? Because we cut him and Mitch retired,
right?
Or whatever. So,
and I'm not. I wouldn't say the receiver decisions were abysmal. I like the talent. I think him being made to miss 7 games without being arrested is a travesty. When Von Miller was actually arrested and didn't have to get no time on the exempt list. I think the Sky Moore was a reach because he was Division II. And yes, he showed out at Michigan, Southern, Virginia Tech, whatever, Michigan Southern Tech, or wherever he came from.
Western Michigan, I think.
Yeah. Rashee Rice obviously wasn't a reach. That was a good pick. Kadarius Toney, if he can put on muscle, not even muscle, if he just stay healthier. I think we paid more for MVS than we're getting out of him, and I think that goes hand in hand with not only Mahomes not throwing him the ball, but I think he suffers two guns issues too. Like he gets held a lot, but he won't bring attention to it.
100%.
And he's just trying to run. He gets held. He doesn't say anything. He just goes back. But I think a lot of us don't see that because when he finally gets an opportunity, he's not always catching everything, or he's assuming that Mahomes isn't going to throw him the ball, so he slows up on his routes, and then Mahomes actually does throw the ball where he's expected to be. I mean, I think this season has been a compound of errors that have all reared their ugly head all during this season, and it's helped us kind of figure out that this team wasn't as flawless as a lot of us, because we were winning, thought they were.
Not us.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we were pointing out, but so here's what I think, because we have talked about all those errors, right? You know, first off, going to Jawan Taylor, sorry. Going to Jawan Taylor right now. 4 years and 80 million. Here's the difference, right? Because is that contract really first off, to me, there's not even a debate that it's not worse than what it would be if Orlando Brown had accepted Brett Veach's offer a year ago. Like, to me, it's not even close. And one of the reasons is because Jawan Taylor is much more athletic than Orlando Brown Jr. is. And I want to go back, because even before you said it, Gooch, when you were talking about the timing thing, you made me think of something that I was wrong about this week in a tweet, because someone had tweeted about, just like making all of Jawan's problems, about the alignment. And I went and I looked at the penalties, and I pointed out like 8 of his 17 penalties were holding and face mask, and so I was emphasizing, it's not just the illegal formation or the false starts. But, as you were talking about the timing, and I started to think about it, and then you kind of alluded to it, can't you kind of chalk up holding to the opposite of the timing part of it? So he's getting false starts on one side, and he's trying to get the timing, and he's overcorrecting, and then he's stuck having to hold a guy, because now all of a sudden he's so afraid of having a false start that he's a little too late, and he's stuck in a position where he has to hold a guy. So maybe there's some merit, to that. One of the things I did notice, though, and again, Jawan Taylor has been playing in the NFL since 2019. He's gotten every single one, all 3 of his illegal formation penalties this season. In his career, all 3 this season. It's not like he's doing anything differently this year than he has in other years. And we've seen, right, because us Chiefs fans are a little bit petty. And if the refs are going to, pick on our players, by God, we're going to show them, right? Especially with the Kadarius Toney thing. We didn't have to wait one day to see photos of receivers who were lined up as far or farther offsides than Toney was. We didn't have to wait one day to see photos of that, right? We've all seen Lane Johnson and half the tackles in the NFL. Laramie Tunzel, Trent Williams. Every single great tackle is doing the things that Jawan Taylor has been doing. But they're all household names. The Chiefs are a hated team the people are exhausted of. And I'm not excusing Jawan Taylor, okay? Scott, don't get me wrong here. But you have to remember that we were all complaining about Jawan Taylor in the playoffs last year. Joey Bosa and the Chargers were complaining about Jawan Taylor last year. Like a playoff game, people want to say, well, it was the opener and everybody was watching this game. The game against the Chargers, everybody wasn't watching that. There was another game going on at that time. Joey Bosa is a big-time guy, and he was complaining about it. He was crying about it on the field. He was crying about it after the game. But guess what? Nobody said a word. Nobody cared. Nobody had an issue with Jawan Taylor's snap count, timing, where he was lining up. Nobody cared until the moment he came to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. And as Gooch said, all of a sudden, something he's been doing his whole time in the NFL, he's not allowed to do anymore. And it's taking the whole season. All right, here's the thing, right? Scott, if it hadn't been called, right? If it hadn't been called, none of this had been called. Would it be realistic to expect two offensive tackles new to the team to come in and be dominant from game one? I would dare you to find an offensive line where it works like that. This isn't Madden, right? I would dare you to find an offensive line that it doesn't work like that. There's a reason why when you get towards the end of the season, offensive lines that have played together every snap are some of the best offensive lines in the NFL that season, right? It's really hard to, from the get-go, to look great as an offensive line when you haven't been together. We added two new bookends, right? And I still say on top of it, if you look at offensive line play in general this year, defensive coordinators are screwing with offensive lines. They're just screwing with them. They've studied the responsibilities. They know how the offensive line is going to block. This is every team. They know how the offensive line is going to set their protections, right? And they know how to manipulate. They know how to come and line up to manipulate what the offensive line does and screw with them. This is something every offensive line has been dealing with this year. You take that. You take two new offensive tackles playing with their teammates for the first time, which, you know, I think I said a few weeks ago, by the way, right? Year one, Orlando Brown Jr. Oh, you know, this is his first year in the system. We got to give him time. Year two, everybody was still saying the same thing. If he'd been back for a year three, right, that was going to be the golden year when finally he got it in our offense. Pulled out my headphones. That was finally going to be the year that Orlando Brown Jr. got it. But we're trashing Jawan Taylor year one. Listen, I get it. Like, there's frustrating parts to his game. But he's still young. He's still athletic. He still has potential. I think that he can clearly live up to the contract. Year one, not so much. But I think he's a better investment for the future. Even, you know, the potential better investment for the future than Orlando Brown would have been, and Orlando Brown will be for the Bengals. Like, that's my assessment of the whole thing. I don't know if he can play left tackle next year. Clearly, Andy Heck and Jawan Taylor are going to have to go to work this offseason. I believe he will put in the work. I believe he will come next year being able to work on that time. By the way, the whole timing thing, right? New quarterback that he's playing with, right? He's been playing with a new quarterback. That was going to take some time anyway when you're playing predicated on timing. Lane Johnson isn't getting it right every snap. He's getting away with it, but he hasn't been getting it right every snap, and he's been playing with Hurts for 3 years now, right? Something like that. Like, I think there's enough there to where we can be patient with Jawan Taylor. You know, I don't think Donovan Smith has been playing healthy this season. We weren't expecting to see Wanye Morris play this season, and he's kind of getting thrown into action. I think there's a whole, you know, it's just like a whole bunch of things going on at the same time that's compounding the offensive line issues. And the offensive line issue is one of many issues with the offense, you know, that's helping compound all the offensive issues. But we were talking about the offense last year. It had its issues. You know, I think, going back to what Gooch said, I think Andy and Brett thought, you know what, with last year's wide receivers, we made this work. We made it work without Tyreek. We can make it work again. Andy and Brett and maybe Andy Heck looked at the offensive tackles and said, hey, we made it work with Orlando Brown Jr. We made it work with Andrew Wiley. These are not top athletes. they are not top offensive tackles, and said, we can make it work with these guys. Did that gamble pay off? Maybe not this season. Maybe it'll pay off next season. But I think those are the two things that they looked at and the two things that they thought that they could get away with this year. And I still go back to the two things that I said, right? As ugly as this offense has looked, it still came down to 2 or 3 plays every game. 2 or 3 plays every game where we've shot ourselves in the foot. And that's been the difference, as ugly as everything has looked. And at the same time, I still think part of it is when Andy's scheme is not working, we're missing the receiver outside of Travis to pull off the whole backyard ball scramble drill. Part of the shooting yourselves in the foot has been the receivers, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. In this game, though, what was more concerning to me was the fumble. I don't know if you went back and watched that, Gooch. The fumble, right? It was the wildcat play where Pacheco was lined up and Patrick was lined up as kind of the running back. On that play, the defensive tackle gets right through. And part of that is, and listen, I don't know the protection responsibilities, but Creed immediately goes to the left to block nobody. Like, I don't know what they were expecting, right? But he turns his whole body, right? He turns it like a 45-degree angle, right, to go towards Tooney to help block nobody, and lets the defensive tackle go right by. One of my favorite follows on Twitter is Jim McNally, former offensive line coach for the Bengals, former offensive line coach for the Bills, or consultant, 2 teams I hate very much. But he was an offensive line coach or assistant offensive line coach for 20-some years in the NFL. And every day he puts out stuff. And I've watched enough now to know that he would say in that situation, 1, Creed needs to stay square. 2, don't be lunging any direction. You should not be lunging to your left or right off the snap of the ball. You should be foot firing in place. Creed vacated the A gap immediately. He let that pressure through. And if somebody else, all I'll say, right, because it's only possible either Creed screwed up or Trey screwed up. Trey was blocking a guy on that play. If Trey hadn't blocked the guy that he blocked, that guy would have been the one who got through and blew the play up. This isn't the only play this season we've seen things like this, where it's like, what the hell is the offensive line doing on these plays? This wasn't on Mahomes. It wasn't on Pacheco. It sure the hell wasn't on the receivers. I don't know how it could be on Nagy. This was Andy Heck's offensive line with a protection issue. It wasn't Jawan Taylor. It wasn't Wanye Morris. It was the interior offensive line. Like, there are issues. All right, I've talked a lot here. Scott says that KT needs brain muscle tissue. You know, I'll say this, Scott, because KT missed time before the season began, right? Andy's practices, Andy's training camp is known to be rigorous to get players in shape from the get-go. Part of that is he wants players in shape so that when you get to the end of the games, when you get to the end of the seasons, the players are still in the condition, right? Because the idea is if you are fatigued at the end of a game, you start making mental errors. I think there's a compounding effect when you're throwing too much at a receiver as far as making route adjustments on the fly. That receiver isn't in physical shape because he was injured and he missed time. And then you start to see some of these errors pop up. Because if a receiver, I forget who it was that was talking about this, Eli Manning, I think, on the Manning cast, maybe Chiefs and Eagles, Gooch. I think it was Eli Manning who was talking about, because he was contrasting how the Eagles had a much smaller playbook and they were working on perfecting each play, while the Chiefs have an immense playbook and the receivers do not get enough reps to perfect their routes on each play. So the receivers are constantly thinking about what they're supposed to be doing, which leads to mental fatigue. And what happens when you have mental fatigue? You're not concentrating on catching the ball. But I've heard somebody else try to say that the Chiefs receivers are thinking too much about catching the ball, and that's why they're not catching the ball. All I can tell you is what Eli Manning said, during this Manning cast. So, I think that there can be, we can oversimplify things. Maybe we can overcomplicate things, but I think sometimes we can oversimplify, specifically what a given player's issues are. And you guys are all, I'm just looking now at the chat, seeing all this food talk. I'm not happy with you guys. Scott says, no pass for Veach, not drafting offensive tackle early, except that rental rookie contract a lot cheaper for fail than those big salaries being paid out. Here's what I would say. One, when have we been in position to draft an offensive tackle who is going to be a day one starter to begin with? Like, when during the Mahomes era have we had the draft capital to get that guy, right? We haven't, have we, Gooch? We haven't been there to where we've been able to even get in position to trade up for a legit left tackle in the draft in the first round. And I think the other thing is, and I can be absolutely wrong on this, but I don't fault Brett Veach for offensive tackle and wide receiver the way a lot of other people do, because as far as I'm concerned, Brett Veach is Andy Reid's yes man. Andy gives Brett a list of what he wants. Wide receiver, who he wants is Brett is getting what Andy wants. If Andy likes the wide receiver room, Brett's not going out there and getting wide receivers. If Andy like Jawan Taylor, maybe Brett is the guy who's saying, hey, what do you think about Jawan Taylor? Or, hey, look at this film on Jawan Taylor. Do you guys think you can correct these issues that they see on tape? Do you guys think he's athletic enough to move to left tackle or whatever it is? I 100% believe that Andy Reid is the one who gives the stamp of approval on every move. That Brett Veach isn't making one move without Andy giving his okay, without Andy giving his approval. As far as I'm concerned, Andy Reid and Andy Heck both said Jawan Taylor is the guy. And Brett Veach said, okay. My understanding of the way the whole thing works, Brett Veach says, all right, here's option 1, here's option 2, option 3, option 4, option 5. Andy and Andy, what do you guys think? And they're the ones who are telling Brett what they prefer, what they think, and Brett is acting on that. Gooch, am I wrong on this? Do you see it a different way?
I think it works like that, but I think they also have to answer the Clark too. And on the offensive tackle thing, I think the only time we ever really had it, we moved up and drafted Trent McDuffie. So then the question becomes, would you have rather had a tackle or would you rather have Trent McDuffie? And in that draft that we got McDuffie, I think there was really only 2 tackles that would have been day 1 starters, and they were already gone. So that's kind of a catch-22 there. Because I don't know. With Mahomes' contract, you have to get cheaper anyway. And I understand that rookie contracts are cheaper. But let's say we don't draft McDuffie, and we get an offensive tackle who now needs a couple years to get set and be ready to defend Mahomes. Are we now complaining that we didn't draft a corner?
Or when Snead walks and we don't have a Trent McDuffie in the cornerback room, are we then complaining that Brett Veach totally neglected the defense? And Scott, I want to say something on this, right? Jawaan Taylor, we're giving him a pass, but he's still playing the freaking season. He's still good enough to be out there starting. That's the difference. We're talking about the difference between a second-round offensive tackle who's actually going to have to set the first season versus a guy who's still good enough to be out there playing. And we probably wouldn't be talking about if Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth hadn't started talking about him to begin with in a very shady circumstance, right? And by shady circumstance, I mean we're setting the tone for week 1, right? The Chiefs are playing the Lions. NBC's broadcast is hyping up Aiden Hutchinson pre-game and during the game. The game's at Arrowhead, and they have Aiden Hutchinson's parents mic'd up for the game, and they're constantly panning to him. Tell me, in the history of broadcasts, when the hell has a broadcast team ever mic'd up an opposing player's parents and promoted that throughout the whole game? Mic'd up players, mic'd up opposing team's player, mic'd up player, mic'd up parents of opposing team's player isn't getting a sack, going up against Jawaan Taylor the whole game. And what do we start talking about? I'm sorry, but the circumstances to that are absolutely mind-boggling to me. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. But regardless, the point is Jawaan Taylor is a starting level offensive tackle in the NFL from day 1. We're talking about giving him a pass for season 1 isn't the same thing as talking about drafting a guy that you have to sit for the whole first season. Because at the end of the day, a offensive tackle that you're drafting where the Chiefs could realistically draft one, it's a guy with enough flaws that you're taking a huge gamble, right? If a guy is dropping that far, the chances are most of the NFL sees him as a guy who's going to have to move to guard or who's going to be a backup. Lucas Niang, listen, Lucas Niang was supposed to be a first-round talent who fell because of injury concerns. I don't know when we saw Lucas Niang healthy that he looked like a first-round talent, has he? Am I being disrespectful there, Gooch?
They haven't seen him on the field enough because he's injured.
He was supposed to be a first-round talent, but the reason he fell was because of injuries. Like, if you are a first-round offensive tackle, if you're an offensive tackle with first-round talent, you're generally not making it to where the Chiefs draft or even where the Chiefs can realistically trade up to. Am I wrong in that, Gooch? Like, there's some kind of
not for a high end tackle. No.
Like, there's some kind of concern, right? Orlando Brown went what, third round to the Ravens as a right tackle. He's apparently, according to the Chiefs for a couple of years and now the Bengals, a starting left tackle talent, technician or whatever. Nobody, 32 teams passed on him 2 times. And the Ravens drafted him, what? I got to check here. I know it was the 3rd round. What exact pick it was. He was the 83rd overall pick. Which means 32 teams passed on him twice. 19 of those teams passed on him a 3rd time because they had concerns about his ability. Like, you're going in the top 10, 12, maybe 15, right? Rashawn Slater, I think, was 16. But even then, there was some concern about his arms, right? There's very few premium left tackles in the NFL. What, 3, 4? So it's not the same thing to talk about giving Jawaan Taylor a pass in this offense. We gave Orlando Brown 2 years of passes in this offense. Kept saying he's got to adjust to the system. He's got to adjust to the system. You have to have chemistry with your fellow offensive line. That's part of the reason we're talking about you have to give him a pass. You have to get used to the quarterback's snap. You got to get used to the quarterback's cadence. Especially if you're a guy like Jawaan Taylor or Lane Johnson, those guys who had that timing mechanism, right? They were skirting the rules. Lane Johnson is still doing it. He doesn't get called for it. So part of what we're talking about giving him a pass on is the fact that he's having to adjust things that the NFL was fine with him doing for his first 4 seasons in the NFL. But he's still playable, is the bigger thing. Like, I don't think you would necessarily call him a liability on every snap, would you? But, I think part of the problem is you can't even compare Wiley to Jawaan Taylor or Donovan Smith or Wanya Morris to Orlando Brown Jr. because Orlando and Andrew were getting more help. They were getting more help. Andy was helping them. I think that's a bigger problem this year because the receivers we have can't even get open. So now all of a sudden, Gooch, what do? Can you afford to help out your offensive tackles by slowing, having guys chip and slowing their them getting into routes? Can you afford that now? It's a compounding problem with the whole offense. So it goes back to something Dan Orlovsky said that I think has some merit. Although he was a little wrong because he said that Patrick Mahomes is the only player in this offense who has the talent right now to play in a shotgun predicated offense. I think he forgot about Travis Kelce, who can absolutely still do that. But his overall point was the receivers in this offense, and even the offensive line at this point, need protected. And that has to happen by playing more under center and utilizing a play action passing game. Play under center, run the ball, play action pass, protect your receivers, help them to get open, help your quarterback, help your tight end who's getting double teamed and triple teamed every play. We have Scott and Scott with us. Hey, Scott. Glad you're with us here. Oh. So we kind of got off here. We were talking about Chiefs and Bengals. Gooch, do you see the offense rebounding in this game?
Rebounding, I don't know. Better showing, yes.
What does that look like though?
21 points. 50 yards rushing.
I don't know if you saw this, Gooch, but I don't know if I can find it now. I put it up earlier, right? Our favorite Chiefs analyst / Baker plus or slash homemaker Dan Harms had a tweet about the Chiefs and their turnovers, right? I don't know if I can find it here. I'm going to look really quick, see if I can. Oh, here we go. Let me pull this one back up here, Gooch. The Chiefs haven't played a game without a turnover in a month. They only have 2 games this season without any turnovers and 9 games with 2 or more turnovers. What do you think about those numbers, Gooch? It's been a whole month since we've had a game without a turnover. We've only had 2 games this season without any turnovers. And 9 out of 15 games this season, we've had 2 or more turnovers. Hey, Scott, we appreciate you being with us. We'll see you next time. 9 games with 2 or more turnovers, Gooch.
That's crazy.
9 games with 2 or more turnovers and only 2 games with no turnovers. Just insane.
You're shooting yourself in the foot.
I think that's the big key for this game, right? And that's a little bit what scares me because, again, when we had a high-powered offense, Lou Anarumo still knew what to do. It's like the water boy, it's like the whole water boy thing where, what is it, Coach Bayou has the playbook and he knows exactly what they're going to do. Which, by the way, speaking of, I believe someone said that Mitch Holtis made a comment similar to that about the Raiders and our offense. Like it was like the Raiders defense was in the huddle with us. Like they knew basically every play what was coming. And I don't know how much of that is true and how much of it is what you said, Gooch. Mahomes hasn't been looking off defenders this season, right? We haven't seen any no-look passes, have we? We haven't seen very many of the special throws that Mahomes has made in previous years. And you mentioned something that I think I've been harping on for a year and a half now, which is Mahomes and pump fakes. Can you tell me the last time you've seen a Patrick Mahomes pump fake? Because I don't know if we've seen one since his first or second year as a starter. A pump fake from Patrick Mahomes. We certainly haven't been seeing him look off defenders to throw the ball. And I think part of that, which I think is another issue, right? I think part of that is because he has no idea where the hell the defense is going to be. We've seen a lot of plays where Mahomes wasn't even quickly got off of his first read because his pre-snap read was wrong. And he anticipated the defense being in a coverage that they rolled out of or never rolled into. And post-snap, he never made that adjustment. And so he quickly got off a read and went to his next progression. And I think that's part of why people are like, Mahomes is missing this receiver, or this receiver is wide open. This receiver is wide open every play. And I'm not saying that to be completely negative on Mahomes because, again, I think defenses all across the league are playing much, much more difficult this year. I think you're seeing a lot more creativity, a lot more post-snap movement that's unexpected. You have defenders covering zones that you don't anticipate, that you're not taught a defender is you're not going to play this defender and have him drop into this zone. This defender can't get across the field to play that zone, but that's exactly what defensive coordinators are doing. I will be happy if the offense can put up 21 points and have one turnover or less, Gooch. But I would be surprised if they're able to do it against Lou Anarumo. I think this is going to be a huge defensive battle. And one thing we haven't even talked about, Harrison Butker, up until the last 2 weeks, has been the best kicker in the NFL, even better than Kareem Hunt. And he's now missed a field goal in 2 consecutive games. Do we need to be concerned again about the kicking game, Gooch? maybe I'm just being way too critical right now. But
underinflated. The second one, everybody said right around where he was kicked, the height of his ball, the wind was swirling through there. So he might have kicked it with the swirl in mind and just got a real big gust because it started out down the line. It just kind of drifted back. So I wouldn't be worried yet, but it is interesting.
fair enough. So one of the things I was talking about before you got in here, Gooch, and I know you've seen it now. I shared it with you and Aaron. The whole thing about the last time an NFL team, an NFL offense had negative 18 yards or worse in the first quarter was the 2011 Kansas City Chiefs, who were quarterbacked by Tyler Palko and head coached by Todd Haley, and we're 5-8. And Todd Haley got fired the next day, right? People brought up, well, the Chiefs were 5-8, right? So that had something to do with it, and Todd Haley blew up on the sidelines or whatever. So, but the Chiefs were 5-8. Here was my question, Gooch, that I posed. What is the difference, right? And this isn't a rhetorical question. I'm actually asking it because I think it's an interesting question to consider. What is the difference realistically between Todd Haley's team being 5-8 and that happening, right? And Todd Haley's quarterback being Tyler Palko, and this happening to the Chiefs, who are 9-6, but have the best quarterback in the NFL, who is probably the best player in the NFL, and the best tight end of all time. Like, how do you, when you handicap for that, for Todd Haley being 5-8 with Tyler Palko as his quarterback and the offense having at least negative 18 yards in that first quarter, how do you compare that to that happening to this Chiefs offense, but them having Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce? Like, what's the comparative record for 5-8 when you have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce as compared to Tyler Palko being your quarterback?
It's a really good question. Not 9-5.
Because you can't just say, well, they were 5-8 and this team's 9-6. Yeah, but Tyler Palko was the quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, is it unfair to ask if Todd Haley, right, as much as we hate Todd Haley and we just want to crap all over him, is it unfair to ask if Todd Haley had Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback and Travis Kelce as his tight end, would they have been 5-8? Would they have had negative 18 yards in the first quarter? Is it unfair to ask how much worse it would have been in this first quarter with Andy Reid having Tyler Palko? Like, to me, 5-8 or 9-6, given who the quarterbacks were, kind of negates the whole record part of it.
I'm going to have to agree. Then the difference would be the 2 Super Bowl rings.
So then the question is, how much leeway do, two Super Bowl rings buy you?
We won't go through another season like this. I think there's going to be some changes on the team and in the coaching staff. I think this is just help make it so.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but I'll say this for like we're at the point, right, where Bill Belichick is questioned. We're kind of at the point now, for whatever reason, that people want to give all the Patriots success to Tom Brady. And I don't know if that's because he went to a very loaded Tampa Bay team and won a Super Bowl. Won a Super Bowl against a team that had a backup offensive line, mind you. But that Tampa Bay team was loaded. Like, so at some point, pedigree only gets you so far. Right? I don't know. I agree, though, that something has got to change. But who's that going to come? Who's that going to come from? Right? Because we already know that Andy is slow to change. Andy's loyal to his coaches. We saw him with Bob Sutton for an extra year or so. Well, what many people consider to be an extra year, sticking with him a year too long. So who does it come from? I don't think that Brett Veach has the, I want to say, use the word authority to check Andy. I think that Clark Hunt's the only one who has the ability to check Andy Reid. Am I wrong in that? Am I wrong in this assessment? Like, Clark Hunt is it. He's got to be the guy. He's the only guy, in my opinion, who can sit down with Andy.
Well, that's how he has it set up, so that Veach and Andy both report to him.
So then, I mean, so if we're talking about changes, then what you're saying then is Clark Hunt is going to have a difficult talk with Andy Reid? Like, is that what we're thinking? Or do we think that Andy is somehow going to change his stripes?
Well, it didn't take Clark to get rid of Bob Sutton. Andy can see the writing on the wall, I think.
Well, yeah, I hope so. And do we know though that it didn't take Clark Hunt? Maybe Clark came to Andy, and Andy said, "Give him one more year." And because he said that, then he had to. I don't know. I don't. Daryl, I don't think this is going to happen, but I also don't, like, I can't justify dogging on Veach when, to me, the offensive stuff lies on Andy's feet. And I know what Gooch just said here, but I still think that even though theoretically they're both supposed to report to Clark Hunt independently, Brett Veach, to me, is still Andy's right-hand man, right? Like, the analogy that I used earlier in the RGR Discord is that to me, Brett Veach is like Andy Reid's accountant. Andy's giving Brett his list of, all of his businesses, all of his losses, all of his investments, and sharing his vision for his savings and everything with Brett. And Brett Veach is listening to what Andy's saying. He's taking everything that Andy's giving him, and Brett is like, okay, with all your investments, all your businesses, all your losses, here are your tax loopholes, right? Here's how we write this off, for your taxes. That's how I see their relationship. Andy is telling Brett, here's what I want at offensive tackle. Here's what I want from my wide receivers. Brett saying, maybe here's where I see the weaknesses. And Andy's like, we can get by with this. Here's what we can do. We can make by with this. But this is what I really need you to invest in. And so one of the reasons that I don't think that Brett Veach can talk to Andy Reid about his offensive scheme, or even, I'm not even sure Brett can say, hey, these are the kind of, here's where I think we need to go with the wide receiver room. I think he can say that, but I don't think he can tell Andy where Andy's offense needs to go, because going back to the analogy, I think that's like the accountant trying to tell the client, here's how you need to be a husband to your wife. Here's how you need to be a father to your kids. Like, that's not the way the roles are set up, at least as I understand it. So, yeah, Daryl, I understand it's his job to bring in the weapons, but he can't do that independently of what Andy Reid wants. Because this is where you see organizations split. When the GM is giving a coach weapons he doesn't want or weapons he won't utilize, then it gets you nowhere, right? You have to be on the same page. Brett Veach started out as Andy Reid's personal assistant. I don't think that he's making any move that Andy isn't triple stamping. I think that's the problem. Should he push back against some of what Andy wants? Yeah, he should. Is he going to? I don't think so. Maybe he does a little bit, but when push comes to shove, Andy's the big guy. You're not going to shove him. He's also a Hall of Fame head coach. And as Gooch has said, he's got 2 rings. So, there's only so much, in my opinion, to what Brett Veach can do. Anybody you replace Brett Veach with is going to be stuck in the same situation. Because you only have so much clout in that room. As much as people want a singular person to blame, this whole operation is a collection of people making decisions. They are all in on every move. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Andy is generally at the top of the hierarchy in all of that. I think that there may be people who disagree with him at times and they're not speaking up. And we probably are missing that, where Bieniemy did have the audacity to speak up, right? You see Patrick Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy going face to face, and you know that EB doesn't have a problem getting right back in someone else's face. He doesn't care that you're the best player in the NFL, so he probably doesn't care that Andy, well, to an extent, he doesn't care that Andy Reid is Andy Reid. If he believes it, he's going to say it. I think that there are 3 people with the Chiefs last year who could stick up to Andy Reid. Patrick Mahomes, Eric Bieniemy, and Clark Hunt. I don't think anybody else could. I don't think Brett Veach could. This year now, there's two people, Patrick Mahomes and Clark Hunt. Yeah, I think Mark Donovan is just kind of marketing and part of Clark Hunt's kind of extension, right? As Gooch was talking about, Clark Hunt wants to grow the brand, even internationally. I think that is Mark Donovan's area. The media content, growing the brand, all the facility stuff, crunching, that part of it, I think is where Mark Donovan is coming in. I don't know how much he even gets into Andy or Brett's area of things. But it's a good point because we don't really talk about Mark Donovan enough. I don't know. Gooch, you have anything else you want to talk about here? Or are we ready to just call it?
Sorry, I was out for a sec. I'm back.
Is there anything else you want to talk about here, Gooch, or are you ready to just call it?
We can call it. We've been on for almost 3.5 hours.
All right, guys, we want to thank you guys for joining in tonight. We may have something special coming up in the next few days or so. So maybe be on the lookout for that. But yeah, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you had a Merry Christmas and stay safe out there. And I'll just say this: make sure you're washing your hands because there's a lot of junk going around right now. And I know what Gooch is about to say here. And, I just want to say something along those lines because I know what he's going to say. I've had 2 high school classmates lose their fathers in the span of the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've had a cousin-in-law die in the last week. I had a great uncle die in this last week. A co-worker of my wife and I, her husband died a few days before Christmas, and a couple other people, like just in the span of this last week. And so what Gooch is about to say here, it's not just words, even though he says it basically as a memorized thing. It might sound repetitive, but don't let the repetition of it lose the power of the meaning behind it. So with that said, Daryl said, Happy New Year's. Daryl, hopefully we're back before then, but just in case, you're right, man. Happy New Year's to everyone. Gooch, go ahead and pay the bill.
Happy New Year's, Daryl, everyone else. I hope you all enjoyed your Christmas. We appreciate all of you watching our content, whether religiously or in passing. I've got 2 things in the works. I've been out because I've also had some things happen, which I am actually going to address in its own video. But as we roll over into the new year, I'm saying, look out for people, make somebody smile, tell somebody you love them, even though I say it repeatedly, like, you never know what that can do for a person. Just not even random, just somebody that you have met, maybe talked to, actually are friends with, that you haven't talked to in a while. Just call them up and be like, hey, what I'm saying? In case I haven't told you in a while, I love you. You know what I'm saying? And look out for each other, man. 2024 is around the corner. This COVID thing keeps getting variations. People are getting sick again. Look out for yourselves. Keep yourselves healthy. Football is just a game. We get heated about it and stuff like that, but they're humans as well. We have to remember that and enjoy it. Tomorrow's not promised. Everybody enjoy your New Year's, and we'll catch you in the next one for sure. Hit that theme music.
Yeah. Hey, and I'm gonna say this really quick. Right. You go to the stores, whatever. Give people smiles. It costs you nothing, right? You don't have to know people. Just give them smiles. They're expecting frowns. They're expecting everyone else around them to be as stressed and hateful. Just slow down and give people smiles. It makes people's day, and it costs you nothing. All right. Now, as Aaron would say if he is with us, we'll be back.
You got your team, and we got a kingdom. Ready for war, we score and win. We're the Super Bowl champs, the king of the hill.